What is up, Drama Alert Nation? I'm your host, Killer Keemstar. Let's get right into the news. First up on today's episode of Drama Alert, we're going to cover the Deadliest Warrior episode, Genghis Khan versus Hannibal. I'm your host, Matt Davis. That's my actual name. Here with me representing Hannibal.
Best warrior of all time. One of the most anticipated episodes of all time. I'm Lucas.
And here representing Genghis Khan,
Craig Taylor.
and of course our special guest star. You know him as the man behind the camera, running the ones and twos. He's not only doing that today, but he's bringing his guest knowledge to all things Mongol. Brendan.
Indeed. Hello. Good to be here. Finally on the pod and not just sitting quietly in the corner.
Is this your first camera appearance? No.
I did Celt versus Persian.
Right.
Was
Go check that out if you want to.
Oh yeah,
check it out.
season 2.
I was gonna say, I thought you were
yourself.
So obviously, folks, this is not Drama Alert. You have stumbled onto a much better and more wholesome YouTube channel.
You're still gonna do the Keemstar voice?
What is up? Yeah. So today we have Genghis Khan, the 13th century Mongolian ruler whose legions built the greatest empire of all time, versus Hannibal, the Carthaginian general whose army of elephants terrorized Rome, the greatest empire of its time. Who is deadliest? Now I'm going to say right out the gate, folks, we're running on about 20 plus years that I've been saying Genghis Khan, and we're running on about a week and a half of me saying Genghis Khan. So if I slip up, which I already did at the beginning of the episode, but we're not redoing the intro, please forgive me. Genghis Khan. He's dead, all right? Yeah.
Are there any Mongolians watching? Please forgive us.
Right, yes. Yep. So, these warriors, they're coming in today. Stats. Genghis Khan is 1206 AD, age 39, height 5'8", weight 170 pounds. Then we have Hannibal of Carthage, aka Hannibal Barca, not Hannibal Lecter. Stats 216 BC, age 26, height 5'7", weight 155 pounds. Boys, this is a 1400 year time gap, okay? Age gap, speaking of Keemstar, all right?
He's a fan of Hannibal.
Right, yes, yeah. Allegedly. So, 1400 year difference. I think we did the calculations. I think we determined that Sun Tzu was actually a bigger time gap between Sun Tzu and Vlad the Impaler. But this is either the first or a close second. So, I want to kick it over. Let's start with Lucas. Let's go around the table. You seemed passionate before we came in here. You might be fired up because of your Nami t-shirt.
Oh, yeah.
You know, she's looking
Nami,
good.
One Piece.
Ever heard of it?
Ever heard of it? Like 1,000 episodes.
I want to get some of you guys' thoughts. How much did you remember from this episode, from its original run? And what do you think rewatching it this time?
What did I remember originally? Basically nothing except the elephant.
Except the
what
elephant.
everyone remembers. What happened when I rewatched this? Bros, this episode broke me. I don't know why. And you'll find out later. But this episode, it drove me to like wit's end for some reason.
Yeah.
Firstly, my first bitching point here, that 1400 years is very significant, and they try to play it off like, oh, they're both in the Iron Age.
They don't even really talk about it, because I didn't realize it until you said that.
They mention it once at like the very beginning, and Jeff's like, there's 1400 years between, it might be Dorian or Jeff, but they're like 1400 years between these warriors, but they still both fall in the Iron Age. Then they turn around and Genghis Khan has all steel. And Hannibal has
bronze.
He has some steel, but his armor is all bronze. So it's like, you know,
How should they bring it up on Joan of Arc? Like, just
Yeah, I was
like
gonna say I bitched all last week about like the what was it, like 400 year gap or something. Yeah, this is pretty significant, and I think it's one of those episodes where you kind of hear that line and you're like, well, okay, I already know who wins.
Yeah, if you're a fan of the show and like you've watched all the episodes like we have, you know, the writing's always on the wall anytime you see a warrior that has like superior metallurgy, the term they use in this
factor.
They also call them the greatest warriors of all time. It's up for debate.
Well, we can touch on that. Craig, what were some of your thoughts from this episode back in the day? What do you think rewatching it now?
I did not remember this episode except for the elephant. I didn't even remember who won. So I got to watch a Deadliest Warrior episode not knowing who the winner was.
I did not remember
pretty
at all.
Yeah,
either.
which is pretty fun. It's like, people talk about a book you reread for the first time, or like, you know what I mean? You forget how it goes and to reread
I
it.
had my guess who was gonna win though.
Yeah.
Or do you-
Yeah, I was confident in Genghis. And in terms of in terms of how I felt with the episode, I actually really liked it. I sent a snap to you guys. I would put this as an A-tier episode. I think what it lacks is like a bullshit factor or something that's goofy or funny experts. I don't think that it's...
There's
Wait till what I have to say.
some bullshit. I mean,
The elephant is debatably the coolest test on the show.
the elephant versus the recurve bow.
Yeah.
That's like a season 1 type matchup where you're like, okay.
There's one every season that's like, it's an odd matchup.
This is almost a meat and potatoes episode where you're like, okay, 2 warriors, but I think they sprinkle it with some bullshit.
Yeah, well, either way, I like that. I would put it A-tier.
Okay. Craig's got it A tier. It almost gave Lucas an aneurysm. I actually have a disease, intractable. I don't know when I got it, but I was young. It might be genetic, where even if I haven't seen one of these episodes since it came out, I cannot forget who wins. So I'm cursed forever to always know who won and never forget.
And who's next? You
Forbidden Lovecraftian knowledge. Deadliest Warrior.
Exactly. Brendan, do you remember watching this episode back in the day? What do you think rewatching?
Absolutely. I, of course, only remember the elephant, and looking back at
And elephant
this
never
episode-
forgets. That's why.
Exactly.
That's where it comes from, the phrase.
We have to address the elephant in the room.
But I remember the terrible CGI for the elephant. That's, seared into my memory.
Yeah.
But rewatching this episode now, it seems like it sort of answers all like the bullshit that we complain about, like of testing weapons in similar areas. But there was one thing lacking in this episode, and I couldn't put my finger on it for the longest time. And I think it's just there's very bad chemistry on this episode between like the experts and cast. It just seems like there was no soul in it.
Absolutely. That makes sense.
Yeah.
You laying it out like that, I definitely think that was
Because
a problem.
by all metrics, this should be exactly what we've been asking for, but it just seems to fall a little short.
Yeah. I really like that observation, Brendan. I like putting it that way. Yeah, because it's sort of, I guess to me, Craig, when you sent the Snapchat saying it was an A-tier episode, it was in response to my first rewatch in a while, and I rewatched it, a few times to do these notes. And my initial thoughts were that it was kind of boring. Like, I was like, snooze fest. Didn't really like it compared to some of the other episodes. And I think you're right, Brendan. It maybe not, there's not enough experts hamming it up or arguing. Everybody's a little too agreeable, maybe. I don't know if that's a valid complaint.
Is it because they had 2 doctors on this time and they were trying to be more serious about it?
And of course we'll get to the experts, but those guys are obviously legit, very easy to look up. And I always talk about this every episode where you got to frame it like a wrestling match, like a WWE match, and I feel like there's no heel or face character in this episode. And I feel like maybe if you were to make one, Genghis Khan would probably be, because Hannibal's fighting against Rome's tyranny, and Genghis Khan is this warlord carving a path through Asia, but it's not really framed in that way at all. And also to what you said, Lucas, right from the beginning when you see the age gap, God, I think you star joke, when you see the time gap allegedly, and you see steel versus bronze, it is kind of Hannibal's got a lot to overcome here, but it wasn't so bad. I rewatched it a couple times. I did love Susie the elephant, so shouts out. She's definitely the star of the show.
Oh yeah.
She legit?
Yes, she is.
A legit
She is an
elephant.
elephant.
Yep,
yes.
she has an IMDb credit too. And I guess my fondest memories were this episode coming out and then playing Rome Total War on my computer and playing as Carthage and having the elephants, and then
Hell yeah.
also doing the console command cheat where you type in Oliphant and you get the giant elephants from Lord of the Rings. So that's a hack for you kiddos out there if you still like to play Rome Total War on Steam. Just type it in, Oliphant.
And speaking of elephant, little fun fact, expert fun fact, is Susie actually plays Big Red in Kilimanjaro Safari.
Really?
Shout out.
Really?
Yeah, you know Kilimanjaro Safari?
No.
Shout out if you got that reference. I want you to leave a comment. Continue.
Okay. So, I don't know. Anything more to say about the intro before we get into the episode, guys? You know, I'll touch on some of the comments made here, but
I guess like my first thought was that was going to be the diet episode. Like this would be the one episode where all they do is talk about the diet and then like they don't talk about it again.
it only comes up a couple times. And speaking of that, we'll segue right in. One of the first things that does get brought up is Dr. Dorian talks about diet because he's always going on about fatigue, the fatigue factor. And he says Changgis's diet was mostly protein and that Hannibal's is much more balanced. He says, you know, veggies and legumes.
Carbo load. He ate all that pasta.
Yep. Yeah, he's carbon up. He's carbon up. He's cultivating mass, and that this will give Hannibal an advantage with stamina. So I wanted to kick it over to you guys for anybody that did some research. Lucas, I know you usually look into this medical stuff. Did you look into this at all, like the differences between their diets?
No, we're gonna have a little bit of like more, you know, my usual health thing later. I didn't look too much in the diets, but I do want to say I'm gonna be on Dr. Dorian's ass this episode. He was one of like the reasons that I was like throttled at 99% with all of, and even that too. How do they even know what these guys' diets were? Honestly, is Genghis only eating 100% protein 24/7, and Hannibal is just carbo loading 24/7?
You have the Chad Genghis listening to the Joe Rogan pod, eating friend of the show Joe Rogan.
Jordan Peterson carnivore diet.
Yeah, he's on the Jordan Peterson carnivore diet, and then you have the soy boy Hannibal.
Liver King cough.
Eating nothing but veggies.
I'd like to think, you know, like they find like dinosaur scat and they do this testing. Someone found like a fossilized piece of poop and they're like, that's Genghis Khan's.
And
Meat.
the
There's like a shit liquor on every paleontology team.
Colin Steve.
the
Shit liquor.
the Chad Liver King defeats the soy boy Hannibal. So, Brendan, did you look into any of this at all, or?
I did a little bit. There's a YouTube channel called Tasting History with Max Miller, and he did a really good episode on the diet of Genghis Khan. And it goes into the fact that he actually made a decree among the Mongol tribes under his command that whenever they are going to eat an animal, they're going to eat absolutely everything. Like, they're not going to give the bones to their dogs until all the marrow is extracted. They're going to just conserve every bit of food. And that has a bit to do with his early life, because he started out rather poor and had to forage for food. And so he didn't want any of this food going to waste. And I also did learn that in Mongol culture, a lot of the aristocracy would eat primarily meat diets because they were pastoralists and had a whole lot of, you know, sheep and other sort of protein available.
Yeah, and it's, you know, back then, before spices and all that, you know, cooked meat is probably...
They did have spices because they were like so close to China.
I'm sorry, I was thinking about like when you're stir frying veggies up in a pan and you're like adding stuff. But you are, obviously they had some spices. I was just thinking like cooked meat in general probably tasted a lot better than like the raw vegetable or the cooked veggie. But hey, shout out to Hannibal keeping that marathon diet. We can bring it up again when we get to X Factors, because it does come up again. Now, Jeff, as we already touched on, says Both of these warriors fall in the Iron Age, claiming they both had steel. However, we will see later in the episode that Changgis's steel armor is superior to Hannibal's bronze armor and helmets, and that does become like a big factor in the results, you know. And one little note from me, I thought the guy who played Hannibal in the episode, he looked like the dude who played the Centurion in the Roman Centurion episode. So
I don't know what Hannibal looks like, but he does not look like that.
I did some research, and the actor's name is Hans Kurt Link. And sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, sir, but he's only credited.
We know you're watching.
So he's not. He doesn't play the Roman Centurion. He's only credited as playing Hannibal. But I saw that one other show he appeared in is Tattoo Nightmares on Spike TV. So shout out to the time that I ran into and met a guy on the beach.
I was there.
From Tattoo Nightmares.
It was one of those strange, surreal moments where I had no idea what was going on.
We were on our senior trip from high school, and we're walking back, and there's an episode of Tattoo Nightmares. I forget what the original tattoo is, but he's got a really awful tattoo on his stomach, and he gets a samurai helmet like over it. And he was walking down the beach while we were walking back to the boardwalk, and I just was like instinctually, I was like, dude, are you the guy from Tattoo Nightmares? And he's like, yeah, man. And I was like, cool. And then I just kind of ran off like with the rest of the guys, and everybody's looking at me and they're like, Matt, what are you doing? And I was like, that guy's from Tattoo Nightmares. So I shout out, I did meet that guy, but I don't believe that's Hans Kurt Linka, whatever. But I didn't Google it, so it could be.
Ooh, I like to think it was.
Could be.
You know what he reminds me of? I saw a tweet that it was some period film of like an actress they didn't buy who she like that they were like, she has a face like she knows what an iPhone is. That's kind of what this guy's like. He has a face where he knows what an iPhone is.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. And then, of course, Matt's movie corner before we get into the experts. I have here insert Silence of the Lambs joke. Everybody give us your best.
I want to say that is one of the sounds that like traumatized my childhood. I just hated that sound when he made it in that movie. I'd always be like, yeah. Which is what you're supposed to do. You're feel like.
Scared of Hannibal Lecter?
No, just that like that sound. Just like it's the same like when you hear a sink dripping like over and over again. You're like, oh my god, that sound just annoys me. It was like the same thing with.
You were scared. I laughed.
Me too.
I thought it was funny.
Me too. I would kick his ass.
I thought it was funny.
I bet he only eats
I'd shoot him with
plants. I eat meat.
Yo, and not to turn this into the Silence of the Lambs podcast. That scene where he's like he kills that security guard, that was filmed at Soldiers and Sailors.
Yes, it was.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Shout out at downtown Pittsburgh.
So yeah, Hannibal Lecter. I don't think he's named after Hannibal of Carthage. I think he's named Hannibal because he's a cannibal. So Hannibal the Cannibal just rolls right off the tongue. But in any case, actual movie I would suggest is there's a 1959 movie just called Hannibal. And you probably don't know any of the 50 stars that are from it, so I won't say, but it's free on YouTube. It's an hour and 44 minutes. I did watch it, and it's a bit dated. It's mostly a love story. There's a couple action scenes. I was impressed that they had like 8 elephants, and it's all live action. You can tell they're herding around elephants. It's pretty cool. I did end up actually enjoying the movie. It's not that long, free on YouTube, like I said, so if you want to check it out, go ahead. For Mr. Genghis Khan, I ended up watching, also free on YouTube, with like a little over 2-hour runtime, Genghis Khan, 1965, starring Omar Sharif as Genghis Khan. Omar Sharif, popular actor at that time, not Mongolian, he is Egyptian. And he's the closest thing to a person of color that there is in the movie. There's not a single Asian. I think the guy that plays the Chinese emperor is named Richard. And, you know, a lot of brown face, a lot of white ladies with blonde hair. Very interesting. I didn't enjoy it as much. It wasn't like a terrible movie, but I mean, you could check it out.
Probably better than the John Wayne one.
Right. So the infamous movie from 1956 called The Conqueror, where John Wayne plays Genghis Khan, And I wouldn't recommend watching that. It's widely touted as John Wayne's worst film, and like just a bad film in general. But
Just sounds like a bad idea too.
if you want a good laugh, just Google him in like the Temujin makeup. So it's pretty funny. The only other one I'll mention is there is a Russian film titled Mongol: The Rise of Genghis Khan. It was released in 2007. I did not watch it, but I'm mentioning it because that has got the best critical reception of any of these movies that I've seen. So, yeah, that's Matt's Movie Corner. Also, ironically enough, Silence of the Lambs is kind of a better movie than all of these movies, so you might just be better off.
Just watch that. Just
Yeah.
watch Percy Jackson and the Olympians. Lucas's Movie Corner. It's always Percy Jackson.
Or you could watch Avengers or Greatest Showman.
So
I've never seen Percy Jackson, for the record.
I don't know. You guys want to do history first? I've been talking a lot here. Let's do history before we get into the experts. We'll go a little out of order. So for Hannibal, the show says Hannibal fought Rome during the Second Punic War. Lucas, can you give us some background on Hannibal's life and his campaign during the Second Punic War, and also maybe touch on what is his legacy today?
I want to say something real quick, though. I'll be real with you guys. I have no fucking idea who Hannibal is.
I put a little excerpt in here. The show expects everyone knows who Hannibal is, but as I said, I could be wrong, but he seems like a slightly lesser known like warrior throughout history. I mean, people who
You know the
actually-
name.
Yeah,
but
people who study history are obviously going to know who he is, but like your average guy walking down the street, you're like, what do you think of Hannibal? It doesn't carry the same weight as like, oh, what do you think of Genghis Khan?
Yeah, right.
Like it's not but they act like on the show it's just like a household name pretty much.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. As someone that does not really know who Hannibal is, yeah, I didn't really learn a whole lot because you got to know about like I guess what Carthage is and some
Yeah.
Rome history, which I don't. So yeah,
And that you don't hear about Carthage as much because they lost. So I believe the conclusion of the last Punic War, which I think was the third one, I believe that's the one where Rome burned Carthage and salted the earth so nothing would ever grow there again. Classic Rome. So Lucas,
Being nice.
why don't you enlighten us about Mr. Hannibal of Carthage and why he thinks he can get away with one name along the lines of Beyonce or Zendaya?
Sure, I'd love to explain. Who was Hannibal? So, is it Carthaginian? Is that what they call
Carthaginian.
Carthaginian? Okay,
Yeah.
I hate that, like saying that word. I'm gonna butcher it like 20 times.
Carthaginian.
Carthaginian. So he was a Carthaginian general and statesman who commanded the Carthage in their battle against the Roman Republic during the Second Punic War, as we were just saying. So he was born in 247 BC. His father, Hamilcar, was a leading
Carthaginian.
Carthaginian.
There you go.
I'm just going to use my own word and everyone's going to accept that.
Think of the things that give you cancer.
Carcinogen. He was a carcinogen
Yeah.
during the First Punic War. So Hannibal lived during a period of great tension in the Mediterranean basin and was which was kind of triggered by the emergence of the Roman Republic as they had defeated Carthage in the First Punic War as well. So around the age of 9, Hannibal started begging his father to bring him during wartime, and his father agreed, and he had a test for Hannibal where he held him over a fire, roaring in a sacrificial chamber, and made him swear he would never be a friend of Rome. Great dad. Hannibal told his father, "I swear, so soon as age will permit, I will use fire and steel to arrest the destiny of Rome." Villain arc.
Yeah.
it really is. I hate to say it's like an anime backstory.
Right.
He's like the villain. Yeah.
Did he actually say that? Who knows?
Right. It sounds epic though.
There's a lot of stuff with Genghis Khan's history where it's like that's probably not
Oh yeah.
how it went down, but
But it sounds cool.
it's fun. Yeah.
So during the conquest of Hispania, Hannibal's father was drowned in battle, and Hannibal's brother, Hasdrubal the Fair, became the new commander, with Hannibal serving as officer. A couple years later, his brother was assassinated, and Hannibal, at the age of 26, was proclaimed commander-in-chief by the army and the carcinogenic government. So that's pretty much the Hannibal that we're getting on the show, where he's age 26 and he just became pretty much the commander-in-chief. So after assuming command, he finished the conquest of Hispania, like modern-day Spain. Makes sense. He continues taking over the territory, and an alliance was formed between him and the Celts of northern Italy, and this did not make Rome happy. So this kicked off what is known as the Second Punic War and some of Hannibal's greatest battles. They talk about the one of the battles in the show. We'll get to that later. But he had a couple of notable battles in there where he kind of like kicked a little bit of Rome's ass, and then they pushed back. And there's some debate that he could have conquered Rome had he strategized a little bit different, but we'll cover that in a little bit. But in his later years, the aging Hannibal lost the Battle of Zama, which lost him respect in the eyes of his people. When he was 46 years old at the conclusion of the Second Punic War, he transitioned to more of like a statesman, kind of like a politician. At this point, the Romans demanded that he was turned over to them as he was the enemy of Rome, and he entered a voluntary exile. He stayed on the run from Rome until his death, and his precise cause and year of death are a little unknown, but it's believed he died after his finger was wounded by a drawn sword while mounting his horse, resulting in a fever and then his death 3 days later. But some believe he purposely took poison when he was staying at King Prusia's castle and was surrounded by Romans demanding that, he was turned over. And some people think it was the king himself that poisoned him. But even though he died, what is his legacy? He managed to cause such turmoil to Roman society. Whenever any disaster struck in a Roman city, they would exclaim, "Hannibal is at the gates."
It's pretty cool.
You want me to touch on his health a little bit here too?
Of course, yeah, get right into it.
So this is my health section. I couldn't find too many health notes as he's pretty old. I mean, he's from BC times, so we're not going to know too much about his health. But I did find that he was afflicted by acute painful eye condition that has never been adequately explained. After his battle using the elephants, when they were on the verge of being killed off, the Polybus wrote that Hannibal himself, on the sole remaining elephant, walked across... What the fuck did I write there? He had much difficulty and suffering and great pain from a severe attack of ophthalmia, which is like an infection of the eye. This led to him becoming permanently blind in one eye, and this was a common condition in those days, especially during the spring. It was even reported that 2 Spartans had this at the Battle of Thermopylae.
Nice.
Current day studies believe he had a form of conjunctivitis, complicated through long periods without sleep, which weakened his immune system and resistance. Other theories suggest that the elephants themselves could have been the cause, as elephants commonly carried the bacteria leptospirosis, which could have been transferred through humans through urine contact.
Okay.
So he went blind in one eye.
Shit.
Was pretty much all I could find.
Did he wear a cool eye patch? He does in the movie.
No, I saw reports that supposedly he like pulled his own eye out and cut it off at one point, but I don't know if that's actually true.
Come on, man. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, Lucas. I appreciate that. We'll have more Hannibal stuff as we get into weapons and armor and such, and tactics.
What did I write in that one sentence? The world may never
We
know.
will never know what Hannibal rode the last elephant, supposedly, himself. To where, we'll never know.
I think it was something where Polybus was one of the historians of like that time era, and it was like a heroic tale where he was coming out of battle like all wounded on the final elephant, where he rode it out of battle with an injured eye. That's what that was supposed to mean.
Okay. All right. Well, Mr. Genghis Khan. The show says Genghis was able to unite the Mongolian tribes into an organized and disciplined army, which then carved a warpath throughout Asia, creating the largest empire the world's ever seen. Craig and Brendan, you guys do whatever order you want here. Can you give us some background on Cengiz's life and an overview on the rise of the Mongolian Empire and maybe some of Cengiz's legacy today?
All right, if you don't mind me taking the reins here.
After you.
So, first off, I want to give a shout out to another YouTube channel, a guy by the name of the Jack Meister Mongol History.
Jack Meister.
He is an incredibly knowledgeable person, and he has like a real passion for this. I think he also knows some of the languages and really
Like
good
Mongolians or just history period?
just specifically on the history of the Turkic and Mongolian people. So just want to give a shout out to that. And when I was researching Genghis Khan's life, it always seemed like it'd be a wonderful like story. It'd make a wonderful movie.
That was my thought too.
And they did it pretty poorly from what I've heard. So I took some inspiration from Lucas's Sim, and I decided that I'm going to tell the life and rise of Genghis Khan in story. So, in the ages before the title Genghis Khan was spoken in hushed tones through the quaking lips of conquered people, the man whom which the title referred started life, like all of us, as a mere child. A child by the name of Temujin. In the spring of 1162, the year of the horse, a son was born to a man named Yasuge, a modest patriarch of the unremarkable Borjigin clan, and his second wife, Holun, who was abducted by her current spouse some 3 years prior. And this child came into the world clutching a blood clot in his fist. Could this sign be a blessing or a curse? The child was named after a warrior from the rival Tatar tribe that from a rival Tatar tribe that Yasuge had captured. Temujin, meaning blacksmith. Temujin would have 3 younger brothers, 1 younger sister, and 2 stepbrothers, the older Bekhter and younger Belgutai. The children would all be raised in the traditional Mongol fashion, learning to ride a horse before they could walk, constructing their own bows to hunt, and how to herd livestock. By the age of 8, Temujin was arranged to marry a girl named Borte, the daughter of a prestigious Khan, and, according to custom, would spend several years working under said Khan to pay off his dowry. Luckily, Borte and Temujin were quite fond of each other, so the saying goes, good times never last. After Yasuge delivered Temujin to Borte's clan and was on his return home, he came across a camp that was celebrating a feast and was welcome to join. Unbeknownst to him, the feasting revelers were of the rival Tatar tribe, and some of the men present recognized Yasuge, as he was known to be the one who captured their kinsman, Temujin's namesake. Their lust for revenge overpowering the normal strict observance to guests' rights in steppe culture, they poisoned Yasuge's food. Making his escape, Yasuge managed to live long enough to make it home. By the time Temujin was informed and hurried home, Yasuge was dead. At the next tribal council, or Kurultai, the Taichiud clan, who ruled over their junior Borjigin relatives, declared that neither Temujin nor Bekhter were old or capable enough to take their father's position. The Taichiud also refused to assist the family or absorb them into their own, deeming them a liability, more mouths to feed for little gain. The decision was made to abandon the family to the steppe, a near guaranteed death sentence with winter fast approaching. Temujin's mother, Holun, would not accept this decision without a fight. Taking her late husband's horsehair-clad spirit banner, she mounted her horse and circled the Taichiud as they were breaking camp, waving the banner high all the while. This was meant to shame the Taichiud, as a spirit banner was not only a clan emblem, but a representation of the owner's soul. The statement was clear. Would you disgrace us under the eyes of your own family, in the presence of Yasuge's soul? To continue may bring supernatural retribution. The demonstration worked, and the Taichiud stayed their feet, at least for the day, as by nightfall they silently slipped away under the cover of dark, taking with them the family's livestock and horses, leaving the 2 women, 7 children, and perhaps a handful of supporters to their certain death. This may have been the end for the young Temujin, but through fierce determination and an unbridled will to survive, Holun vowed that she would not let her family go gently into that good night. No, they would rage against the dying of the light. They bent sewing needles into fish hooks, foraged for roots and edible plants, hunted, scavenged, and all worked tirelessly to provide food for each other, however meager. Although now destitute, the family was able to survive. Years would pass, and by chance, another clan of distant relation camped for the season relatively nearby. A boy from the camp named Jamuka happened upon Temujin, and the 2 became close friends. The 2 boys would eventually swear a vow of eternal friendship with each other, becoming blood brothers, or Anda. In Mongol culture, the bond between Anda was stronger and more significant than the bond between familial brothers, as Anda chose each other by their own free will, rather than by the happenstance of birth. Throughout his life, Jamuka would be the only Anda Temujin would ever have. But as the seasons changed, Jamuka's clan would leave, quite literally in search of greener pastures. Though the impoverished Borjigin remnants were able to adapt and live despite their desperate situation, conflict in the family grew. Bekter, Temujin's stepbrother, was the eldest male of the group, and by tradition had absolute authority over the actions of the group, a power which he regularly abused. Bekter would also have the legal right to take Olun as his wife if he wanted. But after Bekter stole food from the group for himself, Temujin had enough and hatched a plan with his younger brother, Kasar. During a hunting trip, Temujin and Kasar murdered Bekter, ambushing him with a volley of arrows. When Olun learned what had happened, she was furious that the brothers chose to fight amongst themselves rather than the Taichud who had wronged them. Temujin fled as news of the murder spread to the Taichud, who sent warriors to capture them. Temujin wouldn't get far and was brought back to the Taichud camp as a slave. Placed in a kang, he was admonished and abused by the Taichud elite, his blood relatives, but gathered sympathy and respect from the poor herdsmen and followers who treated his wounds and gave him food. After a few years, Temujin pounced on his chance to escape. After a feast, he was ordered to look after a boy since most of the men were drunk or indisposed. Temujin swung his kang around and smashed it into the boy's head, knocking him out, and made a run for it. But rather than flee into the open steppe where he'd easily be found by anyone on horseback even after a full day's head start, Temujin made a gamble and hid in the weeds of a nearby river and waited for night to fall. He went back to the camp to one of the families that had treated him kindly. They removed the kang, buried it, and hid Temujin in a pile of wool for a day at great risk to themselves. When night fell again, the family managed to steal a horse and some food for Temujin, who managed to evade his captors and make it back to his family's camp. In 1178, when Temujin turned 16, he made the decision to leave his camp and pursued his betrothed Borte, who had not seen him since his father's death 7 years prior. Fortunately, Borte was still waiting for him all this time, and the two were formally married, with Temujin saving enough to pay for Borte's dowry. After the wedding, it was customary for the bride's family to give a gift of clothing to the groom's father. Without a father and reject the gift or keep it for himself, Temujin had another idea. He would present the gift to his father's Anda, a powerful Khan by the name of Toghrul of the Kerid. Toghrul, flattered, accepted the gift, and in doing so, Temujin was brought under his protection. The Borjigin family, now secure and comfortable after overcoming their harrowing challenges, could now rest easy. Things were finally looking up, but so the saying goes, good times never last. The Merkit tribe, Holun's original tribe before being abducted, wanted revenge for said abduction, and heard that the culprit's son had found a wife, a perfect target, an eye for an eye. During a lightning-fast raid, Borte was stolen, and Temujin barely escaped with his life. Devastated, he trekked to the sacred mountain of Burkhan Khaldun to pray for guidance. There, the sacred mountain showed him the 3 rivers that flowed from its peak, signifying the 3 options for him to choose. He could return down the way he came, along the Kurlan River, to the southeast, and accept this loss as a reality of the harsh life on the steppe. Maybe abduct another wife for their revenge and continue the cycle. Or he could go northeast along the Onan River, where he was born. There he would be safe from raids in the forest, but the land was poor for pastures, and he would have to live foraging for survival like his childhood. The last choice was the Tuul River back to Toghrul. There he could propose a counter raid on the Merkit to raise an army and get Borte back himself. There he vowed he would get Borte back, or die trying. Upon hearing Temujin's suggestion for a counter raid, Toghrul was agreed. Despite he had his own disputes with the Merkit and a desire for more plunder. Toghrul then sent word to his followers and vassals, summoning them for war. Among them was a young warlord making his place in the warrior elite, none other than Jamuka. Reunited, the 2 blood brothers set off to the Merkit lands, army in tow. In the Merkit camp, the alarms were sounded, and Borte, not knowing who was attacking and why, and not wanting to be abducted twice, fled with her captors. A short while later, out of the darkness, she heard a voice, distinct from all the others. It was shouting her name. It was Temujin. In an instant, she jumped from the cart, carrying her away, and ran into the night, towards the voice. The 2 lovers embraced each other in the ruined camp. The Merkits were driven off, and the loot was secured. The raid was a success. But all was not well. Borte was pregnant, and it was impossible to know if the father was Temujin's or a Merkit's.
Oh.
The son that she bore was named Jochi, meaning guest, and his unknown patrilineage would haunt him like a specter for the rest of his life. Nevertheless, Temujin accepted Jochi as his first son and heir. Temujin's family would move in with Jamuka's camp, where the two blood brothers renewed their Anda vow and exchanged golden belts taken from the Merkit camp, and Jamuka began to teach Temujin in the ways of war. At first, Temujin was fine with following in Jamuka's footsteps, but as time went on, Jamuka began treating Temujin less like an Anda and more like a little brother beneath him on the social hierarchy. This came to the head in May 1181, where, when breaking camp, Jamuka decided that he was no longer willing to share leadership with Temujin and instructed him to take the goats and the sheep near the river like a common shepherd boy, while Jamuka would take the prestigious horses to graze near the mountains. Fearing that Jamuka would eventually abandon them like the Taichiud did, Temujin decided that their camps would separate while they still had all their livestock and horses. Temujin was surprised to find that some of Jamuka's followers decided to leave with them as well, including some prestigious families, further boosting Temujin's reputation. Jamuka decided not to pursue them. Over the years, Temujin's reputation steadily grew until, in 1189, he was elected Khan of the Borshigan Mongols, still vassals to Togrul, although Jamuka did not accept Temujin's legitimacy, vying for the role himself. In the following year, Jamuka used the death of one of his younger brothers, allegedly by one of Temujin's followers during a cattle raid, as an excuse to declare war on Temujin. Though Temujin had a small army, he was outnumbered and not as experienced as Jamuka, and in the Battle of Dalan Baljut, Temujin was routed. In a horrific act after the battle, Jamuka desecrated the corpses of Temujin's fallen and boiled 70 prisoners alive, a profane act believed to completely destroy one's soul, and 7 being an unlucky number in the culture.
Imagine getting boiled alive like a giant pot.
No thanks. It's like some Bugs Bunny stuff.
Yeah.
It's like cutting the
He's making
carrot.
the carrots.
The next few years of Temujin's life are not recorded, but there is some evidence he may have spent time working for the Jin dynasty of northern China, slowly rebuilding his strength. Temujin returns to the historical scene in 1196, allied with Togrul to attack the Tatars, enemy of the Jin at the time. The campaign was a massive victory, and Temujin gained a large sum of wealth from the loot seized. This fortune and prestige was enough to place him back in the political landscape of the steppe. With a powerful ally in Togrul, the two found much success in future campaigns against the Merkit and powerful Nayman tribe. Fearing the rise of this Kirid Mongol alliance, their enemies, including the Tatars, Merkit, Nayman, and the Taichiud, formed a coalition against them, with the ruthless warlord at the head, Jamuka. In the 1201 at the Battle of Khoitian, the two armies faced off, but Temujin was no longer the military novice he was before. His army was better organized and disciplined than that of even his ally, with ranks and positions given based on merit rather than by familial relations. Temujin and Togrul's forces held and pushed back the coalition, and after a long struggle, crushed them. Jamuka, sensing defeat, even went so far as to raid the camps of his allies to recover wealth lost in the battle. After the battle, Togrul was sent to pursue Jamuka, who evaded capture, while Temujin pursued the fleeing Taichiud, who were trapped on the Onan River.
So that's wild that Temujin and Jamuka went from being like best friends to then they fight like an epic battle against each other.
It gets better.
And Borta, great name.
Okay, where was I?
Sorry. Tate Shield.
Temujin preserved.
Down. Yeah.
Togrul went to pursue Jamuka, who evaded capture, and Temujin pursued the fleeing Taichiud, who were trapped on the Onan River. Temujin's closest relatives, whose cruelty towards them only fueled their own downfall by encouraging his meritocratic organization. The Taichiud were destroyed and received that retribution promised upon them by Holun after Yesuge's death. In the desperate fighting, a stray arrow pierced the neck of Temujin, nearly killing him. Luckily, the wound was not deep, and through the diligence of one of Temujin's most loyal followers, Jelme, his life was saved. The next year, Temujin marched on the Tatars to avenge his father and put an end to their resistance. He gave strict orders not to loot the enemy camp until the battle was won.
Sorry.
To prevent the Tatars from escaping and to distribute the spoils evenly. While most of Temujin's men obeyed, a few noblemen did not, believing it was their unspoken right to share the loot.
Craig was giving me the middle finger. He started it.
Though this had little effect on the outcome of the battle, Temujin confiscated what loot they had taken and gave it to the common soldiers. This insult to their noble status caused them to desert Togrul, and they brought their discontent with them. By now, Togrul was in his 70s, and talk of who would succeed him was constant. Temujin seemed like the most logical choice, but Togrul's son, Sengum Ilka, coveted the throne and was supported by the aristocrats who despised Temujin's populist breach of traditional hierarchies. Eventually swayed by these voices, Togrul set a trap. He would agree to have his daughter marry Jochi, and during the celebration, when Temujin's guard was down, he will be poisoned. Like father, like son.
Damn.
A fitting end for such an upstart Khan. But the plot was uncovered by a servant family who warned Temujin as he was on his way to the wedding. His plan foiled, Togrul allied himself with his former enemy Jamuka and marched to put Temujin's foolish ambitions to rest.
Wow.
In the 1203 Battle of Kalkaljit Sands was a brutal
Kalka
fight.
River. Was that really?
No, the Kalkaljit Sands. Kalka River is a bit later.
Okay, sorry.
You okay?
Genghis Khan actually wasn't even there.
Wasn't creative.
After putting up a valiant resistance, and though Temujin's forces were better organized, they were finally overwhelmed and defeated. Temujin was able to escape, maybe due to the forces of Togrul and Jamuka stopping to loot Temujin's camp. Temujin and his surviving loyalists fled to the shores of Lake Baljuna. Once more, he had lost all he had worked towards, but he was not alone. Through every tragedy that occurred throughout his life, Temujin always had those who he could count on. His mother and siblings after the death of his father, and Togrul and Jamuka after the capture of Porte. Here was no different. On the shores of Lake Baljuna, his remaining supporters swore an oath of loyalty, and from thenceforth would be known as the Baljuntu. They would be his most honored and respected veterans and advisors in his future campaigns. Though victorious, the alliance between Jamuka and Togrul dissolved quickly, with some men even defecting to Temujin over the uncertainties of this tenuous union. Seeing the cracks forming between his two former allies, Temujin made his move, reminding neutral tribes of past promises, sowing discontent and mistrust in the followers of his enemies, and leveraging every advantage he could find to build a small force. During a Kariyid feast, Temujin caught them unaware and attacked in the night. After 3 days of constant fighting, the Karayids surrendered and were absorbed into Temujin's forces. Togrul and Sengum fled into Naiman territory, but Togrul was caught by a Naiman patrol and killed, as they could not believe that this old man could be the powerful Togrul. Mongolia was now divided in two. Temujin's Mongols controlled the east, and the Naiman, hosting Temujin's enemies, principally Jamuka, in the west. Taking the initiative, Temujin went on the offensive in late winter, catching the Naiman off guard. When he was sure his army was spotted by the Naiman scouts, he lit a large number of campfires to make his army seem larger than it was. The Naiman Khan, hearing these reports, wanted to withdraw, but was shamed into attacking by his relatives. The final battle for total control of Mongolia was fought at the Battle of Nakhu Cliffs in 1204. Many Naiman troops deserted the battle, hearing stories of the ferocity of Temujin's forces, including Jamuka, who left the Naiman to their fate. Whoever was left to resist Temujin was killed in battle, including the Naiman Khan. Mongolia was finally under the sole rule of Temujin. The next few years were spent solidifying Temujin's rule, rooting out any remnants of resistance among the Naiman or Market survivors. Jamuka, after slowly losing supporters for being on the run for so long, was betrayed by his final 5 remaining followers and brought to Temujin. For their betrayal, Temujin had these 5 followers executed, and met with Jamukha in his gar. Temujin then begged Jamukha to rejoin him as a companion, as a brother, as an Anda. But Jamukha refused, asking only for a bloodless, honorable death. And if allowed to live, he will always be an enemy of Temujin, forever a thorn in his side. Temujin, with a heavy heart, grants his only Anda his final wish, and betters Jamukha with the golden belt he had given him so many years ago. In 1206, the year of the tiger, with absolute control over Mongolia, Temujin, at the Kurultai on the Onan River, was given the title of Genghis Khan of the Mongol Empire. Now, his conquests can truly begin.
That certainly was like a freaking movie.
Hey,
Ups and downs.
you're awake.
Yeah, see, I think I
Then the
actually,
empire begins.
Yeah.
I had all that written down, but actually a little bit more. So what I would add to it is that is sort of a summarization of everything up until
That was just the rise of Genghis Khan.
right.
That was perfect.
Yeah. Now
Background.
some kind of holistic stuff, like higher level stuff in terms of him and his army. I wrote down that he was low key woke. There's some highlights of his empire is that it practiced religious tolerance. So, you know, if he united an area, he didn't make them subscribe to a certain religion.
Didn't he kill?
Hold on. Eventually, after he unified Mongolian tribes, they abolished bride kidnapping. So better late than never. In Mongolian society, women could divorce their husbands and hold positions as advisors. He stayed with his first wife throughout his life, and raised their possibly illegitimate son, as we learned. You know, staying with his wife is different than, you know, the other thing, but, you know, soldiers were promoted based on rank and not birthrights, no nepotism. And after his death, the Mongolians were the first civilization to discover a link between diet and health, which is a theme in this episode. Now, on the other hand, he killed unborn babies, used prisoners as human shields, and killed unborn babies, I wrote again. Used dead prisoners as moat filler for siege weapons. And when the plague was brought to Mongolia and Genghis's troops started dying from it, they launched their bodies at the enemies as biological warfare. So, kind of, you know, nobody's perfect.
Another thing is that during, I forget which city, it was his campaign against the Khwarezmian Empire. I think I'm saying that right, or probably wrong. But he had a city pretty much just sterilized. He said that even every dog in that city would be killed.
Wow.
Apparently he had a fear of dogs in his childhood, but I didn't write that down. I couldn't find a place to put that.
Huh.
I have a question for Craig. You said better late than never, but George Washington went.
Well, so to that point, though, there's kind of an interesting, like, positive and negative at this. I watched a video called History on Trial, I think. It's like an extension of TED Talks, I think. And it's like the point of the video is like, you know, there's like a prosecutor and a defender for a historical figure, which I feel like that premise can go a little south depending on what who you choose. But I think it's been long enough. Genghis Khan it's fine. But also in the Wikipedia page, you have this positive and neutral and negative in terms of stuff he's done. So I feel like that's sort of a characteristic of his. And I took a screenshot. I thought it was funny under the negative section, because the positive, it's like, oh, women had more rights than average and all this stuff. And then negative, it says, the conquest and leadership of Genghis Khan included widespread devastation and mass murder. So,
You do.
kind of balances out.
Listen, you don't.
Well, hey, this is a story. We're not saying anybody's in the right or wrong.
Yeah.
You don't get to be deadliest warrior without causing some deadliness.
Yeah.
You know what
I'm surprised they didn't bring that up.
You ready for my health notes real quick?
Yeah.
On Genghis here.
Yeah.
That, again, ancient warrior by today's standards, so it's a little hard to find like any health information, but it is believed that his Mongol horde, that they called it, now that I'm looking at that's what the article called it.
They're actually, just to chime in, there is a successor state to the Mongol Empire that has the single best name of any nation in history, and it's called the Golden Horde.
Hell yeah.
That is their actual name.
Well, there you go. It could have just been
they're
name
amazing.
attributed to them.
That's just a wonderful name.
But the group of Mongols that he led had apparently rampant hepatitis B. So there was a study at Cambridge University where researchers extracted Bronze Age and Iron Age, like the best preserved ancient viral genomes that they could muster, and combine them with modern genomes to kind of compare and analyze and the evolutionary relationships between the strains. They found that hepatitis B was part of life in the Eurasian steppes for thousands of years, and it's believed that the spread was essentially kind of from Genghis Khan and his original conquest of the area. And I know we kind of mentioned it there too, but there was also many believe that Genghis Khan himself contracted the bubonic plague at one point. And
He beat it.
It could have killed
I
him.
think that's what he died from.
Yeah.
I thought he died from the horse, falling off the horse.
Well, I've heard other.
According to the
There's some different sources who say different things. And that's what I've heard from one source. I don't.
What about the source of the deadliest warrior aftermath?
So put that under your negatives. He possibly spread hepatitis B everywhere.
He did a couple like fast facts I bring up a lot with Genghis Khan is 1 in every 200 people alive today have Genghis as a descendant. So based on the views we get, there's at least probably one person watching this whose great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather is Genghis Khan.
You
pretty
could
cool.
come on as a Genghis Khan descendant.
Yes. And his descendants, including you, killed 40 million people, which is 10% of the world's population at that time. So
Yeah, that's all your fault.
might be in the negative. So they say descendants, not just him. So you
It's never too late to turn it around.
listen. Us 4 white people are guilt free. Okay, you can't. We have no way to relate to that. Yeah.
In better terms, didn't he spread his seed very, very far? Also,
But he was married to his wife the whole time.
But he liked to participate in the spreading of his seed.
No,
I think that was mainly due to his family, because since all of his descendants would be in high positions of all these different countries or places, and of course they would have a lot of children as
fair.
well. So I'm not sure if it was just him, because I don't see how that's mechanically possible with all the stuff he's been doing and how he's been going around everywhere. That'd be pretty tiring.
I know that was always like the rumor, though.
It's an assembly line.
the original Nick Cannon.
All right. Well, that's enough Genghis for now. We got a good, healthy dose for you history nuts out there. Let's come back to the show. Let's talk about the experts. So, first up is Team Hannibal. You have Brian Forrest.
You mean Brian Forrest?
Who is listed as a classic weapons specialist and described as a broadsword specialist and an expert in Hannibal's combat techniques. Now, we always know what that means, folks, right? Anytime we get a weapon specialist, and the more specific it is, the more of a sign it is that it's a stunt actor, right? Brian is an award-winning actor, producer, and stunt actor who's been involved with numerous shows and movies. A lot of it is stuff I've never really heard of. I saw he's credited as a stunt actor on Critical Role, which is that
Really?
like literally tabletop RPG YouTube show that Vox Machina is based on. Maybe they did a skit that they needed a stunt actor or something, but
Sure.
there's like hundreds and hundreds of hours of the show, so I was like, nah, I'm not combing through it all.
The party traveled through the Brian Forest.
Yeah. So, yeah, right. Brian Forrest. So, shout out Matt Mercer and the Critical Role gang. Feel free to come on the pod anytime. I'm waiting. I keep sending out emails to people and nobody's the hell.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it doesn't say what he did, but he probably did a skit at some point. Okay. On to the other hand. Oh,
I have some stuff I want to add on Brian
yes.
Forrest. Apparently, he was in a Dead Rising spin-off anime cartoon. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but it was called Zombrex Dead Rising Sun. I don't know if you know what that is.
Hell yeah.
If that might be too obscure.
I feel like probably around the time Dead Rising 2, I think there was like mini webisode.
It might have been
stuff.
something like that then.
Yeah, like some kind of edge media that I didn't watch.
He was also in a Doja Cat Get Into It music video, I guess. As one of the...
That's like her most popular song. It's get into ya.
I'm like not very familiar with
Oh,
Doja
come
Cat.
on.
I'll be level with you.
I'm gonna play the song. I'll get the rights.
Yeah, you're right. Well, Craig, come for the scene with Brian Ford.
You know, I'm
Apparently he was
gonna look
involved
at
somehow.
it. I'm gonna look at it right now.
But they have a trivia section on IMDb too, and I just thought this was funny. His only trivia underneath his name was, "Did you know he was given toys or tools in lieu of toys for his birthdays and Christmases?"
I did see that.
It was like the dumbest.
Christmases was misspelled.
Yeah, he was given tools instead of toys.
I did see that.
And
fact.
his most famous quote listed on IMDb was, "I'm just happy to be on the show."
Do you think that came from Deadliest Warrior?
Probably.
Maybe. So
Which one of these do you think is Brian?
Did you
Wait,
find him?
which one do you think is Brian? Hold on. Which one of these?
So, the second guy on Team Hannibal is Dr. Patrick Hunt, who is listed as professor of archaeology at Stanford and described as a world-renowned Hannibal historian. Now, Dr. Hunt is totally legit. If you Google him, you can see I was going to write down all of his like accreditations, but if you go on his website, it is just like freaking block of just like all the things he's done. So
Dude has his own Wikipedia page.
Yeah.
That's how legit he is.
he's overqualified for the episode is what I saw. So totally legit. Professor of archaeology at Stanford, graduated from like one of those fancy schools in London. So straight up. On to team. Oh, I'm sorry.
I wrote a couple of things down that I thought were interesting about
Okay,
him.
go ahead.
So he directed the Stanford University Alpine Archaeology Project since 1994. He's researched the history of Celtic and Roman presence in the region of the St. Bernard Pass. In 96, he discovered a quarry which contained a temple of Jupiter in that region. In 2007 and 2008, he was part of the National Geographic Society sponsored film called Hannibal Expedition, and he searched for artifacts of Hannibal's in the location of the crossing of the Alps, which I thought was pretty interesting. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Cool.
But that's just some of his feats.
Well, on to Team Cengiz, we have Hosbayar, I believe is how they pronounce his name. We got another one-worder here, another Zendaya. He is credited as a U.S. Marine and Mongol weapons expert and described as a 13th century weapons specialist. Now, he is of another brand of Deadliest Warrior expert they bring on where you can't find anything on him. And it's tough. So like you click.
You think someone with just a one-word name would be pretty easy to find?
No. So here's the thing. It's a popular name. Like there's a lot of people named.
Oh, really?
Like whose last name is Hosbayar. So I clicked on his IMDb and I couldn't find any credits besides Deadliest Warrior. And then it's like you Google Hosbayar and it is. I mean, you're getting everyone under the sun besides the guy on Deadliest Warrior. So he looks like he's probably a former Marine. I like that he wears a K-bar on his belt.
Love it.
The whole time.
That was
Yeah. Lucas, why don't you wear
Interesting.
a K-bar everywhere you go?
Have you looked under the table? It's pointed at you.
He's the workhorse of the episode.
Fi.
I've known there's an expert that does like every single test.
Uh-huh.
Marine Corps. Represent.
Yep, Semper Fi, right?
Do or die. Continue.
Do you have anything on Hosbayar, Lucas?
No, I looked at my own.
Okay. And the second guy, and probably the most prominent standout expert of the episode, is Dr. Timothy May.
Oh, I do have something. He looks like Jason Biggs from American Pie, but aged, because he has like the eyes that are closer together.
Okay.
Go on the pod.
So,
I
he's
want to say real quick. So sorry.
yeah.
I watched the whole Get Into It Doja Cat music video. The only person that it could have been is there's credits. Brian Forrest. There was a
he was probably like one.
there's a guy in a mask. Yeah. Everyone else is like clearly not him. Talent. Brian Forrest, Alien Henchman. I knew it was him.
It was him. It was the only guy it could be. They zoom in. Is that the guy that had like the weird mask on? Or
Well, no. So I
was
think
that Doja Cat?
I think that is Doja Cat, like in the mask, but
He's a henchman.
the alien overlord is Dane Deligrio. Okay, well that's not him, but there's like he has some henchmen beside him. I'll put this all.
You guys are seeing some live action research here.
I'm like happy that his name's actually in the credits on the description of the video.
Yeah, so
shout out Brian.
I could have said that I was that guy in the alien mask.
Shout out Brian. I hope you got Doja Cat's number.
Doja Cat, come on the podcast.
Doja Cat,
come discuss the next episode of Deadliest Warrior.
Dr. Timothy May, author of The Mongol Art of War. Dr. May is also legit. He has published multiple books about the Mongol Empire under the name Timothy Michael May. He is also an associate dean at the University of North Georgia. And on his Amazon author page, his profile pic is from the set of Deadliest Warrior.
Nice.
It's him next to they always dress up the mannequin in like the armor, and it's him next to the Genghis Khan mannequin. So shout out Dr. Timothy May. It seems like he just came on and had a lot of fun. Totally overqualified to be on the show. He didn't just write one book. There's like 12 of them or whatever, and they're all named like Mongol history. So unless anybody's got any more notes on the experts,
does having, like what going off what Brendan was saying, does having legitimate qualified experts just kind of take down the Riz factor of the show?
So I will say they have been running in a pattern with season 3 where you get like one stunt actor or one person that's going to like
fake expert.
Yeah, test the weapons every episode, and then you get like, usually it's a PhD or whatever, as like the historian guy who's not testing the weapons but is just giving like the background info, and they follow the pattern here. I don't think it's bad that they have like overqualified people on the show. I think maybe I don't know, I think it goes back to like they didn't have like Philippe on there, to be like, oh, George Washington can kiss my French boots, Yeah, I like to eat snails. You didn't have that kind of like villain play up.
Esgard, go fuck yourself.
So,
Felicia Merrild.
Because if you were going to cast Brian or Hospire in something, I feel like they would both play face.
Jim from American Pie.
No, they would both play like face characters, like good guys. So, we really didn't have our villain for the show. All right, you guys ready to get into some weapons?
Dude, I'm so ready for this first weapon they bring in.
Hell yeah. So we maybe get, and I know we have said this at least 5 or 6 times. It would be interesting if you could go back. Maybe get the most absurd comparison. And I remember when it popped up, I was like, is this long range? Is this mid range? It's listed as a special weapon.
I have this as this is my range.
Range question mark. They do mention that it's a special weapon. So there's somebody outside that's doing like he's like dancing in my.
Is someone like filming a TikTok of him?
I don't know.
Oh yeah,
like,
they
recording. They are.
Wow, that's embarrassing.
Yo, you get your phone up, videotape.
Recording stuff for the internet.
Right, yeah, embarrassed.
Believe.
Penis.
That's gonna look real good. It's like fucking pitch black outside.
Just all glare at them.
I think they saw us. They were like, wait a minute.
Yikes.
All right.
We're talking about Deadliest Warrior here. And these guys are
nerds, losers.
Some random people in the parking lot. Anyhow.
Time to address the elephant in the room.
The elephant in the room. Special weapons.
We should open the window. Ask them what is a better weapon, an elephant or a Mongol bow. Do it, dude. You got to do it.
Oh no, they're gone.
Yeah,
come on, don't be a pussy.
They are gone already, actually.
Where'd they go?
I think they like walked down.
They probably live in one of those. This is great content for the camera. They probably live in one of the houses down there or whatever. So.
How would they come up here?
They walked up here
because they walk the circle. Because like unless you want to go to the park, but it's already nighttime. So
they're like, when you bring a bow to an elephant fight.
Right, yeah. That's the younger audience, our all male, like, millennial / elder millennial graphic is just
Yeah, we didn't do anything embarrassing when we were young.
Yep.
Tell me about Susie.
So let's get into it.
Boy, Susie.
Hannibal's special weapon, the war elephant, weight 9,000 pounds, height between 9 and 11 feet. Very sus. Yikes. Origin Africa. So
I'd like to think real quick that like there was a glitch in the sim and the fatigue on Hannibal was just like 1,000,000% because he had a 9,000-pound weapon. And so they're like, Hannibal didn't move.
what happened to all the legumes?
Yeah.
Come on,
They
man.
also abuse the elephant sound effect. Susie's just standing there doing nothing, and it's like every 2 seconds.
I have a note about that. It's just like overly dramatic, like angry elephant sounds.
I could just like imagine them in the set, and it's just kind of like standing there, not doing it, completely silent. They're like, "Come on, make noises."
Find out if the force of an elephant stomp can kill. A ballistics gel torso, representing the density and viscosity of human flesh and bone.
Yeah. So they bring on Hayden Rosenauer, who is listed as an animal trainer, and he introduces us to Susie, a 25-year-old African elephant. So I looked up Hayden, and he appears to be a regular animal trainer for movies. He's does more than one, and I'm not sure if this was him exactly, but I think it was his LinkedIn page, and I think he works out of a ranch in Oregon. So cool.
Makes sense for the location.
And Susie herself has a credit on IMDb. She's credited in 2 things. One of them is this. So good on Big Suze. They briefly discuss the tactics of sending the elephants in, barreling toward the enemy ranks. The elephants referred to multiple times as the original tank. And then Mac and Dorian discuss the panic that might ensue when facing an elephant on the battlefield for the first time.
I like how they spend like 5 minutes explaining what it is to be scared.
Yes, yeah. They're like, the adrenaline's pumping, that sympathetic nervous system. Dorian gives us a line, that's a 9,000-pound surprise. And everybody loses their shit.
And everyone clapped.
Lucas, how were war elephants utilized in warfare, and specifically, how did Hannibal deploy them in his campaign against Rome?
Effectively.
Were they actually effective?
You're asking the wrong question, Lucas. I wanted you to have an entomological history of the elephant, like the pachyderm.
The genus and species.
Where did the elephant come from? Yeah.
Just read the elephant Wikipedia page.
So, Hannibal did indeed have an army of war elephants and led them across the Alps on a famous journey on his way to the upper portions of Italy, but many of them had perished due to harsh conditions. This wasn't like in every single battle he was in, he had these elephants. It was kind of like one big famous event that he led these elephants.
Like that type of weapon that's like...
Yeah, and he had this genius idea, which it was bold, I'll put it that way, to lead these elephants in to like take the charge on Rome. But the elephants that made it across were used in the Battle of Trebia, where they panicked the Roman cavalry and Gallic allies. Their use is greatly studied, but no one can quite agree on where he actually sourced these elephants from. I think they say African on the show.
They do. I think they assume that because Carthage is like where modern day Tunisia is. So it's right in North Africa.
There's a lot of kind of studies that it would have been quite a big ordeal to bring them across just because of the bodies of water in the way. So some people speculate that it could have been Asian elephants that he used, but as of that's just as of late, it was considered Asian elephants. So legends go, before the battle, Hannibal would armor up his elephants, give them enough alcohol to get them really drunk, and then antagonize them by poking their ankles with spears.
Oh my god.
The drunk elephants were worked into a fury, and all he had to do was let them loose on the opposing army. So the tactic did work for a good while before the Romans just decided to kind of beat him in a war of attrition, as the elephants required a lot of food and extra supplies to be carried. Hannibal was advised many times to leave the elephants behind, but he was obsessed with the idea of them being what he called a super weapon. This march through the Alps depleted his supplies and weakened his army, possibly because of how much just food and supplies he had to bring for these elephants, and then they started dying off because the Alps are freezing cold. Many speculate had he left them behind, he would have had enough supplies, and with a little proper strategy could have taken the city of Rome.
Oh, that's wild.
That's one of the major theories, that the elephants actually caused him. They caused him to win some battles, but they also caused him to lose the war.
You gotta think, I'm obviously no expert. You gotta think, though, like, it's one of those things where for a very specific situation, those elephants are like perfect, but there's probably a reason they weren't utilized like that often in warfare. And it's definitely a Hollywood thing where like anytime you can, oh, this guy used elephants, it's like a cool thing because it's different. It's unique. I remember Alexander the Great, watching the Alexander the Great movie when he's fighting in India. The Indian army has elephants, and Alexander's men see them because it's supposed to be like they're on the edge of the world and they're in a foreign land that no one's ever seen before, and they see these elephants and like, oh my god.
Those Roman soldiers on the front lines like, yeah, we're Rome, we got this, yeah. What the fuck? Yeah. There's a bunch of drunk elephants running at me.
What does Max say? He's like, the chaos.
Yeah.
They drive that chaos into the ground this episode.
Mac loves chaos. He's like going full Joker in this episode. Mac has been Joker-fied. It is confirmed. So for the test, they managed to get Susie to step on a ballistic gel while it's on a load cell, and then twice more while it's on the ground. Her second step leads to a satisfying organ pop as blood comes flying out of the torso. I should have said squirting out of the torso because it is like a... and they also, as we already mentioned, insert some hilarious pissed off elephant sound effects while the test is going on.
Down. Push. Good, steady, good. Get it. Good, get it. Oh! Wow. Crazy. Check it out. Good. Oh! Bloodthirsty elephant. That's impressive. Did you hear that?
Jeff says that Susie's step on the pressure plate comes out to 2,045 pounds of pressure. So, obviously more than enough to squish any part of you.
That's also just her going like this and barely pushing down on it. Did we really need this test? Is it any shocker that if an elephant steps on you, you're just going to explode?
I think the test is almost illustrative of the concept of the elephant in battle in general, in that in a Hollywood sense, you're thinking of like this really cool thing. And then when you actually get the elephant on set, it's like, an elephant, they're huge, but it's not like a T-Rex. It's not a predator
designed to kill.
Yeah, it's not a predatory animal that like wants to kill. Elephants, of course, are like really smart actually and very kind and empathetic creatures. So there's a reason he had to get them all fucked up on booze and pissed off to get them to trample people.
Yeah. I mean, you do get a 9,000-pound animal like rampaging though. It's got to be.
For sure, and at a line,
definitely destroy some ranks.
At a line of infantry, you're gonna have guys breaking and running. I mean, I probably wouldn't stand there.
Do you ever see the bottom of an elephant's foot too? I just remember that I saw them like recently, and it's like this like grizzle pad on the bottom of it, and it's like one of the weirdest looking things.
I get recommended on Facebook videos of people doing podiatry on elephants and other animals, where they're scraping off like the shit.
Oh, dude, those videos are so satisfying.
Scraping off the Roman soldiers.
Yeah. Those videos are like oddly satisfying. So, Craig and Brendan, I wanted to ask you because as Lucas just mentioned, there are elephants in Asia, and Genghis Khan's empire, well, you can go if you want, but Genghis Khan's empire stretched all across Asia. Did he fight elephants at any point?
If that was me under that elephant, step on my skull, not my stomach. Just want to say that.
It was a Dorian line. He kept us in suspense there.
It's like, geez.
I'm going to say probably not. I don't know for sure, but I'm going to say...
Did he reach India?
Not Genghis himself. He did not, or Genghis himself, but I think some of his descendants, the Mughals, did.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if they fought elephants. They probably may have. So
I just thought it was an interesting question because his empire is so widespread. It's like, did Genghis ever fight an elephant, or? But maybe not. Well,
I mean, it kind of wouldn't matter. He just kind of ran away.
Because they're on horseback. We'll get to that in a minute. I've got a lot to say about the whole elephant and horse thing. Very interesting. So, speaking of interesting, and a special weapon, they match up against the war elephant, the Mongol recurve bow. Range of 450 yards, length 52 inches, weight 2.5 pounds, made of wood, animal horn, and sinew. This is the second time we've seen the Mongol recurve bow. I believe it lost out the edge to the Comanche bow back in season 2, and the Comanche bow outscored it.
That's fighting an elephant.
Right. It went from facing off against another bow to fighting an elephant. And we've also seen the Hunnic composite bow as well, which is a very similar design to the Mongol bow. Now, Timothy May claims the Mongol bow is not surpassed for another 600 years until firearms start becoming more accurate. However, according to the show's logic, apparently the Comanche beat it way before that. Craig and or Brendan, what makes the Mongol bow so special, this recurve bow design? And can you tell us a bit about the significance of the horseback archery in Mongol society? Craig, so that's the serious question, but I want to say, Craig, I know you found some particularly interesting info on the Deadliest Warrior wiki that we're always citing.
Yeah, if you go, because what I was doing is I was looking up the stats in the season 2 to see if they were the same, because there are other weapons where if they're on repeat seasons they change the stats for some reason, and all the page just says you're fat, you're fat, you're fat. Like,
so you have to wonder, like, was that like a leftover from like a couple friends at school, like
us?
Yeah, exactly. Like, yo, I'm gonna change. Hey, Google the Mongol recurve bow, dude.
Oh, we would never deface a webpage related to Deadliest Warrior.
Never.
That would never happen.
So,
have we ever told that story?
Yeah, we told it on the El Alamein episode, I believe. Check out that.
Oh yeah, we did. Yeah.
Because he told us his exciting adventure when he was a special forces commando. So, Craig or Brendan, what makes the Mongol bow so special, and can you tell us a bit about the significance of horseback archery in Mongol society?
Craig?
Well, so I didn't research too much of this because everything I saw was basically covered on the Comanche episode, but what I did think was interesting is on that episode I remember they talk about the feigned retreat, and that obviously is a huge part of Chenghis's battle strategy.
The goddamn feigned retreat.
Yeah, they talk about it like all the time.
I can't wait to fucking get to that.
But yeah, they put a lot of love into these bows, and they would volley fire like a lot of other archers, and
yeah,
sure, Brian can tell you more.
Yeah,
but
the idea I get is that they would run up and shoot for horseback archery. What made it so revolutionary is you just run up and shoot a bunch of guys, and then you can just run back and no one can catch up to you. So is that how it went, Brendan?
In Age of Empires 4, there's actually these cutscenes that give sort of historical
I was going to mention that because in the Battle of Kalka River, whatever, is in that game. It's like the first Mongol level, I think. But
there are these sort of historical lessons that they give throughout the game as like these cutscenes.
Did you play it?
Yes. Yes, I did. And it shows the construction of a Mongol bow and all the things that go into it, and how the horn on the outside is meant to sort of store the energy, and the sinew gives it the flex on the inside, and how they have to very carefully make sure all the sinew is in the right direction. And it's just a fascinating video. But also, since pretty much every single Mongol person would construct their own bow, or at least know how to, I could imagine that quality could vary quite highly.
That's an interesting point. Yeah,
that's your real artifact that you dug up in your backyard.
That's
from my private collection, and definitely not something I got from the Renaissance Fair for $40.
So to set up the test for the Mongol bow,
could I just sorry?
Oh, go ahead.
I got another thing. But,
go right ahead.
Another very interesting fact is how they used these whistling arrows to communicate. They were blunted and had holes through them, and they could even write messages on them.
Oh, cool.
And shoot it towards like their commanders. And of course, the whistle will tell you where the arrow landed, and you could communicate very efficiently. And I just thought that was very interesting.
Move to the left.
Yeah. Dude, I'm already picturing you're riding with the boys and you got blunted arrows. You know you're getting shot with one of those. It's just going to be the most annoying thing.
Is that what they base the Nerf footballs that go?
Mongolian technology.
So to set up the test, we go to Jeff's fabrication lab. This is the first we've seen, which is just the desk that they do everything at. Jeff's fabrication lab, where he uses leather and ballistics gel to create a penetration test for the Mongol arrows, like what it would be like against an elephant. So he's like, this is the epidermis and the dermis and then the ballistic gel. But
I kind of like this segment.
I like it too, but it's really just like doctoring up like what is a normal Deadliest test where
here's some gel and here's some more gel.
They stick like leather over ballistic
That better
gel.
not have been real elephant leather. If you're a poacher, fuck you.
Any poachers unsubscribe? No, I would.
The Hannibal crowd is coming for your ass.
Yeah. Well, we got a terminally ill elephant to bring him for this.
So, Hospayara fires one armor-piercing arrow. This is, quote, armor-piercing arrow from the show, and one, quote, wide-tipped assault arrow, which I thought sounded pretty epic. And he's firing it into the mock elephant. And our old friend New Sensei, you haven't heard of him in a while. This was the last episode that he covered. That was the YouTube channel that covers archery. And he has the video about archery and Deadliest Warrior. So he points out in his video, which we've cited numerous times before, that Hospayara is not using a Mongolian draw when he's shooting the arrows. So make your own assumptions from that observation. And New Sensei also comments in that video that having an elephant versus a Mongol bow is perhaps the most absurd weapon matchup on the entire show. And he might not be wrong.
Perhaps.
So I was curious, and I'm glad I saved that video for the longest time to check for this episode, because I was curious, because like Hospayara is like real physically in shape and strong, and so when he's pulling the bow back, it does look like he knows what he's doing. And so I was curious, like, does he know like the Mongol technique for a bow? But I kind of assumed he didn't, because like who the hell knows that just off the top of their head unless you do archery. So I don't know, make whatever assumptions you want from that. Maybe it's the first time he's shooting a bow. Maybe he just draws it a different way that he's used to. Who knows? But Dorian says the arrows penetrate enough to kill a man, but not to significantly injure an elephant. However, all the hosts agree that it could be enough to spook the elephant into a frenzy, which could hamper Hannibal's forces on the battlefield.
They're already drunk and in a frenzy, so
Right, they're already in the frenzy.
you're just gonna piss it off even more.
So the edge goes to the war elephant. What happens is Mac argues in favor of the Mongol bow, but Jeff and Dorian overrule him by choosing the war elephant. There's kind of a funny moment where Jeff says, hey, don't worry about it, man. Sometimes we disagree. And Mac just smiles and he's like, I mean, I'm right. I'm fine, So I want to take it to the table here. Do we agree with the edge? Any thoughts on
This is, just in my opinion, too absurd of a matchup to even like say, like I could give you edges for either side.
Yeah, this is up there with the Scythian axe versus the ballista, where it's kind of like, how do you say which one is better between the two?
Yeah, I could just off the top of my head, one, they need to give my boy a win, so that's fine with me. Two, I mean, I guess an elephant, you could send it in, animal cruelty aside, you could send it in and you're out of like harm's way essentially. So I guess I could see that getting the edge.
Yeah.
In terms of the edge, I think this is a really dumb edge. I know I said I like this episode. This is probably the thing I have the biggest issue with, because the show's own experts say as soon as an elephant gets hit with one arrow, it's going to go ballistic and be a liability to your backline. So how can you give the edge to this elephant when as soon as you shoot its giant ass body with one arrow, it just goes nuts?
Yeah, and you always got to wonder how this stuff plays out in the sim too. Like, is there a panic? I mean, obviously the sim is fake for season 3. You can't convince me otherwise. But like, would there be just a panic rate? I guess.
Is the elephant not already panicked?
Right. Yeah.
But then how do you can't really accurately control a panicked elephant? Then on a 5-on-5 fight, I feel like a panicked elephant would be.
Yeah. Brendan, do you have any thoughts?
No.
I mean, something like a charging elephant. Say 2 elephants are charging each other, and one of their tusks goes into like the other elephant. It's not gonna freak out and back down. Like whenever animals have these like battles for dominance, they get really injured in those battles. Usually, a lot of times, like debilitating scars and stuff, and they don't like panic and run away. So I guess the edge I can give is if there's a 9,000-pound elephant running towards me and I have a bow and arrow and I have to try to get him to turn away before he tramples me, I'd rather be on the elephant team, I guess.
So, in my opinion, as I said, how do you determine an edge between something like an elephant and a bow? Because they're so different. My opinion, I think it depends on the situation. I think we need more context. So I just sort of put a litany of questions here. Like, how many are being deployed? Like, how many elephants? What kind of formation is going on here? Is everyone on horseback? Like, are the Carthaginians all riding in on 5, elephants versus 5 horses? Or is like most of them on foot? Because what we see in the reenactment, I think, is that there's like Genghis Khan is on horseback and then he's got like 4 guys on foot, which I feel like already right there is not what would happen. And then Hannibal rides in on an elephant and he's got 4 guys on foot, which already, I'm not sure outside of a story that Hannibal actually ever rid elephants into battle. He's probably on horseback with like his guard, probably.
The strategy, what I could find that Hannibal used was similar to what I was talking about, so he had 80 elephants originally. Somewhere in the range of 40 to 60 made it through that journey through the Alps. And he did that, got them drunk, angered them, and those elephants went in as like their own first initial wave to break up all the lines. No one, to my knowledge, I mean, there could have been like riders, but Hannibal himself is not riding this elephant into battle. It's kind of that first disruptive wave, and then you do conventional warfare behind this elephant.
Because riding on a horseback allows you to engage somebody with a sword or a bow. Riding on the back of an elephant, I feel like would put you in extreme danger, because like if you fall off the elephant, there's a good chance you get seriously injured.
Yeah.
And you can only engage with a ranged weapon, like from up there. And how practical is it really when you're bumping around on the elephant and he's like going this way and that?
The other thing too that I just thought of that doesn't get brought up, Hannibal has no ranged weapon.
That's interesting.
So, like,
well, he's got the like
Soliferum.
They're effective to like 30 meters, but they're not.
It's like a spear
gonna be like a bow
versus a bow. But yeah, that you can throw that, but especially with Mongolian archers being as adept as they are, like he doesn't have a long range weapon that can compete with that.
I can assure you, his armies had long range weapons. The show just chooses to ignore it.
At the end of the day, I look at it like it's a 5-on-5 fight. Battle to the death. If they're bringing 1 elephant in, I think that 1 elephant against 5 Mongols is kind of a little useless. Like, because if they spread out far enough, I don't know. Like, it's different. It's better when you're sending in a group of elephants against a line of guys, because then it's like, where the hell do you run? You're tripping over your own guys, and then when the elephant hits the line of men, it's just gonna like break. And if there's more than 1, but if there's 1 and there's 5 of you, especially if you're on horseback, you could easily like just get away.
How fast does an elephant run?
20 miles an hour.
I don't think so.
Well, I don't think you could outrun it, but I'm saying like it's not. Is the elephant that precise of a weapon versus
25 miles an hour?
If it's 5 on 5,
just outside of humans, I think humans can run 22 at max.
if you're for a 5-on-5, I just think a bow is it's practical, it's reliable, you know what it's going to give you.
Not alive.
There's just too much going on with the elephant. I just don't know. Like,
I don't know if you said this, the environment,
scenario,
if it's mountainous, you can't use an elephant.
Yeah.
If it's at all, unless it's like a...
the sim takes into account
all terrain.
Every single type of terrain
different
on
planets.
Earth. Yep.
Yeah. 1 billion X factors.
Yeah, so...
They don't even address the fact that, like, the elephants wore armor, too. So this whole test is just...
All right, so
just BS.
We're just like the hosts. We're a little mixed on the elephant versus the bow. But let's move on here. So... Next up, we have the swords.
Dude, how cool is Dave Baker?
Yeah, Dave. We get to see Dave Baker making both swords in his workshop again, which is cool. We have Genghis Khan, Big Genghis Khan, wielding the Turco-Mongol saber, length of 48.5 inches, weight of 2.75 pounds, with a steel blade. Now, we discussed Turco-Mongol sabers as the inspiration for Vlad's sword, the Killage, as seen in Season 2. Check that out. And we also recently saw Napoleon Bonaparte with a cavalry saber. And that, of course, lost out to Washington's Koli Schmard. Now, too bad the Falcata doesn't have that special parry technique where he can... Hannibal can just like... Ooh.
Actually,
So Craig and Brendan, we've talked about sabers a couple times on here. Do you guys have anything to add on the origins of the Turco-Mongol saber, and was this used by Genghis Khan and his forces?
Absolutely. Although this swords were mainly reserved for people who had, particular wealth or the heavy cavalry.
Like a lot of armies.
Yeah. So the armored cavalry would usually have a sword, but the lance was definitely most preferred. Sword was just kind of a backup, and of course, considering his wealth, I am pretty sure he would have a sword. And as for, it's actually not known if particularly the Mongols, the Turco-Mongol saber was the inspiration for modern cavalry sabers, or if it was a different design. We don't even know if the Mongols came up with the curved cavalry sword design on their own, or if they
curved sword.
They've got curved swords.
No, you just
Sorry.
for that one.
Once Brendan said it, I was like...
We don't know if they developed it or if they came into contact with it and adopted it. So...
I mean, I had only a few kind of fast facts. So for me, when I searched this, it was only the second result was the Deadliest Warrior Wiki. So a little legitimacy.
Yeah.
Primarily used on horseback, and a common feature was a tilt on the pommel, which reminded me of Count Dooku. And, that's supposed to help with the swing on horseback. And it's also a featured weapon in Ghost of Tsushima.
Yes, yep. I spent many a time parrying many a Mongol blade as I carved my way through Japan.
I didn't beat it, so no, I didn't. But
good game.
Those facts were fast, dude.
Curved sword. The next up, we got Hannibal's sword, the Falcata, length of 26 inches, weight of 2.5. Length, really? This would be like the Joan episode, yeah. Length of 26 inches, weight of 2.5 pounds. Spanish steel blade with a bronze handle. Now, this sword looks very similar to Alexander the Great's Kopis, which the Kopis was a popular Greek sword design of the time, so I imagine they're probably the same sword. Lucas, can you give us some history on the Falcata? And also, I'm very interested, Dave Baker mentions Spanish steel and says it was the finest steel you could get in that day and age. Did you look into Spanish steel at all?
Not too much, but I can tell you it's just because during that in between the First and Second Punic Wars, his father was busy conquering Spain. So that's where a lot of their establishment was. So he had a lot of Spanish steel.
I actually know about this because this is in relation to the ancient Celts. The Celt-Iberians were very skilled steel workers. And since they were fighting against the Carthaginians and then were mercenaries for the Carthaginians, they most likely provided a lot of their weapons. And I think even the helmet that Hannibal is wearing is of Celtic design. I think it's a Montefortino. I don't know.
I saw a lot of that where the Celts and them, and they had that relationship formed. And a lot of
they made a lot of weapons for a lot of different.
The Romans are constantly stealing the Celt look too.
Also, I remembered that they said that the falcata was the sword that killed the most Romans, and wouldn't that just be the gladius? Since the Romans were just more often fighting other Romans.
Yeah, I think it's just to play into that Hannibal. The only man to ever take on Rome.
By himself.
By himself on the back of an elephant with his falcata. Anything else about the falcata?
Yeah, I got some. Yeah. So according to historical record, this sword was actually used by Hannibal. He outfitted his troops with it. So the falcata is not actually the native name for the sword. No one knows exactly what it was called by the ancient Iberians who invented it. Falcata is a 19th century term coined by historian Fernando Folgoso. It is said that the Roman armories were surprised by the quality of these weapons and the quality of the iron used in its creation. It was used on the battlefield. And it was equally used for ornamental and ceremonial reasons, as many highly decorated falcata have been found in tombs buried with, higher ranking people. There's a couple historical artifacts dug up with this sword, so we have some pretty good examples to go off of, which is probably what Dave went off to create that one for the show. It is very similar to the Copus and is thought to have been developed around the same time. So they're not necessarily the same sword, but it's the same idea in two different areas called two different things.
When you see them, like the handles look the same, the blade looks the same. It's like
I make this, you make this, I call it this, you call it this.
Right.
It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So back to that 1400 year gap, it's been stated that the falcata style of swords fell into obscurity when better irons and steels made longer saber-like blades feasible and stronger. So one sword is their other sword's replacement, essentially.
Yeah.
And that's because we have a 1400 year gap.
Yeah, it really shows through. We'll talk about the tests here, but it really seems like the Turco-Mongol saber is just an upgrade. Like, it's just the falcata's competing against a better sword. It's like
this test.
It's like a bolt action rifle going against a full auto.
Yeah.
Where it's just like that bolt action rifle can still kill you, and it might have been the best in its day, but it's just going up against something that's just more advanced.
It's going up what replaced it.
Yeah. What do you want me to go through the test before you bitch about it?
Yeah, this one's a minor bitch. I'm not getting in my real hot-headed moments yet.
Quick recap. Stay tuned, folks. This is gonna Krakatoa. First, they test each sword on foot against 4 targets of beef. I do I love Mac, so I hate to pick on him, but I got to a little bit. There's like a part where they're introducing both swords, and Mac is like, oh, and so for close quarters combat, I can keep this guy at a distance. And he's like talking about how great of an advantage that is. And then as soon as he gets a falcata, he's like, see, now this is better for close range because I can move it a lot quicker and a lot faster. And I'm like, well, which is it, Mac?
He's like flailing around a little bit, and then everyone's kind of like,
is Mac gonna kill me? Yeah. So they test each sword on foot against 4 targets of beef. Hosbayar with the saber clocks in at 72 mile per hour velocity, like on average, I guess, with each swing, and he kills all 4 targets. Brian then comes in with the falcata and clocks in at 66 miles per hour velocity with each swing and also kills all 4. He's a little more accurate with like Jeff's spray painted lines. So Brian was able to wield the falcata with one arm, while Hosbayar, who looks pretty in shape, has to use 2 hands to wield the saber. So at this point, like, the experts are leaning toward the falcata. They're like, it takes less energy. It's doing some impressive damage. Then they test both swords from horseback, and the saber, shocker, delivers a more impressive blow from horseback because it's bigger. It's designed to be used from horseback, and you got to think they're probably doing more combat with a sword from like the back of a horse than you are, especially the Mongols, like, they're not hopping off the horse and running at these guys. So
Not till the sim.
What's going on, guys? Just recording this episode that you're watching right now, and I want to point out a goof we did not catch. The guys wanted me to emphasize that no one will be able to say after this episode or this podcast concludes that we did not catch every single goof in the show. So this is obviously the horseback riding test. That's Host by R testing the Turco-Mongol saber. And I noticed something interesting. So this is him doing the test. And here he goes. Short wind up, and he hits the beef. Or does he? So let's go back a little bit. Sorry, my Premiere's a little bit laggy. So he goes in for the swing. Again, not quite a strong swing, I guess, is a little redundant. And let's look at the tight here. And this is Host by R, which, by the way, he's wearing jeans. Just look what he's wearing. He's wearing jeans, like this buttoned-up shirt, and he has a shaved head. And then look who actually nails the cut. Oh, shit. Out of focus. Does that look like Host by R? I don't think so. Then who could it be? Who's wearing, like, a long-sleeve white shirt and has brown flowing hair? Who except, if it loads, that dude. Fucking Brian Forrest. Bastard. So another fake test. At least I shouldn't call the test faked. They goofed on who actually tested the weapon. Not the worst sin committed by Deadliest Warrior, but definitely interesting that it was not him. Oh, also, later on, I don't know if I'll be able to find it on the fly here. They do reference this cut again, and they use the same footage. Let's see if I can find it. About how deep it cuts. And then let me see. Sorry, I know this isn't exactly riveting content. Come on. Yeah, so this is a kind of a recap, and this is the same shot of Brian hitting the meat. So Deadliest Warrior, you thought you got one over on us, but you didn't.
They end up giving the edge to the Turco-Mongol saber.
I have one minor.
They give it the edge based on the fact that warriors spent more time on horseback than on foot, even though Hannibal is shown riding an elephant reenactment. And the saber is more effective on horseback. So what are some of our thoughts?
So, but this is actually not even my like normal bitch. This is just one I just remembered. Dr. Dorian, when I say he's on something this episode, the fucking falcata hits that slab of beef and it goes in and he goes, okay, we got some damage to the spinous process.
Oh.
But it didn't sever the spine. This isn't 2023, okay? Yeah. He's like, this isn't a kill. This guy's still up fighting. That is like a 3-inch deep cut that is like a foot long.
Because it hits the spine.
Yeah. Fuck off.
Right. It is interesting that when they test the falcata on foot, Dorian, it's like they gave him the buzzword fatigue. So they're like, just try to bring up fatigue a lot.
See fatigue in the man.
And he's like, after the...
He says like, serious fatigue with this cranking motion.
The cranking motion. So
the fatigue factor.
After the on-foot test, Dorian's like, oh, well, this is an advantage in that we're not seeing Brian use as much energy with the falcata. He seems to have an advantage with fatigue. Later on, when we test against armor, though, you'll see Dorian starts to swing the other way, where he's like, all of a sudden, he's like, you're looking pretty labored going up against this armor. And it's like, well,
it's the way he phrases it.
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of bitches for the armor.
We'll get there, I guess, then.
More bitches than I should.
Do you guys have any thoughts on...
Same.
Well, so Lucas, what is your opinion on the edge? Do you agree with it? I'm assuming you do.
Yeah, I do agree with it.
Yeah.
Just my only point from this one is just like,
it's a tech advantage.
That guy's dead. Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you guys think? Thoughts?
I mean, I'm fine with it. I just noted I like that it was a head-to-head test. More of those this season, and I think it seems that they're giving these edges based on large scale warfare. I think that's why we also get so confused of what the hell the sim is and what factors, because and part of the reason the sim doesn't exist is because if it was very concrete and the rules were like concrete, they wouldn't even bother talking about large scale warfare aside from like, oh, it's good in this scenario. They would say, oh, that's great for large scale, but we're doing a 5-on-5 battle. They don't do that. So they're constantly referencing, it's like this epic total war battle that they're referencing, not the 5-on-5 fight that it's supposed to be.
And this is interesting because in the first 2 seasons, I feel like the most that I feel like I ever understand the sim as a concept is in ancient warrior matchups in the first 2 seasons. Because it's like, okay, you have computer Shaka Zulu and computer William Laws, and they are starting out at whatever distance, right? And they start throwing their weapons at each other. And then as they close in, they pull out like their bigger weapons and then they fight. And then who's ever left alive, they pull out their little weapons and they fight. And then that's the winner. Like the winner is determined there. It gets confusing when you get into squads because it's like, okay, does every Green Beret have every single gun, right? Or does one of them have a sniper and that's why it gets less kills than an M4? You know what I'm saying? In this, because they're doing named guys, they're putting them in command of troops, and every battle is a squad on squad. But then, as you say, Craig, so it's not just a duel to the death. It's 5-on-5, but they keep bringing up like large scale battles, like in Joan and Will the Conqueror episode. I just go and Willie, like Will
and Will
Bill the Conk. In that episode, they kept bringing up siege tactics, and it's like, but does that have anything to do at all with who's going to win at the end of the episode? And it's almost like the show telling you it doesn't matter who wins at the end of the episode because we're just kind of pulling a name out of a hat, right? It's more so to add stuff for you to debate about, sitting around the table with your friends. So yeah, it is odd because I oftentimes think about too, like they talk about Hannibal and Genghis and Washington and Napoleon. They're fighting with 4 foot soldiers. Those guys are more relevant than the commanders themselves.
Yeah.
Like they make up a fifth of each squad, whereas their random guys make up 4/5 of each like squad. So when you start to think
them and Genghis have the same diet.
Right.
So why does that even factor in? Like,
exactly. So
how many legumes are they eating?
Are they just like clones?
Yeah, right. Are they just like, is it 5 Genghises?
Genghis, Changus, Chungus.
And shout out to one-time presidential nominee John Kerry with the Genghis Khan, or Genghis Khan, I believe he called him. So there's your other guy, Genghis Khan.
Get what?
Yeah, I guess I'm all cool with the Edge going to the Turco-Mongol saber because it's just more advanced.
It's fine. Both of them get the job done of what they should be doing. But yeah, the one is like a 1400-year
superior
advancement,
sword,
in technology.
But like I said, it's too bad Hannibal doesn't have a Kolish Mard and can't parry that cavalry saber.
You jealous?
Okay. So we move on to armor. First up is Hannibal's Musculata armor, which is a bronze chest plate that, is shaped to look like an extremely jacked dude. The bronze and wood shield, a brass helmet. Shout out to Craig, who played trumpet in band back in the day. So, brass helmet. And then a total weight of 45 pounds. Lucas, is this accurate to the armor Hannibal would have worn into battle?
As far as I could find, the show does a decent job of representation of what he would have for his time. In my opinion, the helmet looks a little goofy, but even the animal pelt, they don't put it on his actual armor. I can't remember if they do in the sim or not too, but whenever they have it in the like the picture of it presenting it, they have an animal pelt around it. That was very common also for them to wear that. I mean, it's hard to find exactly, but yeah, pretty good portrayal.
Okay, cool. Hospire tests the saber against Hannibal's armor. While the shield holds up, the saber does put a hole in the chest plate and a serious dent in the helmet. Now, Jeff claims the saber delivers 435 psi of pressure, which is about 100,000 psi less than the Spartan shield. And that this pressure to Hannibal's head would have caused a depressed skull fracture, the cutoff of which is like 80 to 100 psi. So it's more than enough to, if this cavalry saber comes down on Hannibal's helmet, it's going to keep him from getting his head cut off, but I mean, he's going to probably die from the concussion blast, basically. Next up is Cengiz's lamellar armor, which is a steel chest plate, steel shield, steel helmet, total weight of 48 pounds. Craig and Brendan, is this accurate to the armor Cengiz would have worn at the time? Also, did he use a steel shield? Because that seems heavy, but I'm no expert on the subject, so...
Well, I'm not sure about the shield, but that definitely is of Mongol design, and that type of lamellar is, from my knowledge, I think that's pretty accurate.
I noticed his helmet looks similar to like a samurai helmet almost.
It's more closely related to the Chinese, I believe. I think they have similar design.
The only note that I had is that lamelier was by far the most popular for Mongolians, but they also had silk armor and chainmail, but that was rarer because it was heavy and difficult to repair. So if you're going to have one type of armor, this would be it for...
Yeah.
For
cool. Awesome. Well, I'm glad to hear they got that right. So pretty cool. Brian tests the falcata against Cengiz's armor. All aspects of the armor hold up, and the pressure delivered to the helmet is not enough to cause injury, probably because of that angular shape where, and I mean just the steel too. Like when that steel hits that brass, instead of deflecting, it's biting into that helmet, which is what's causing all that pressure to come down on the skull. Versus when the falcata hits the steel helmet, it's like glancing off basically. So all that pressure is like not coming straight down on.
When you watch the slow-mo, Brian misses the entire helmet.
Does he? The whole helmet?
He hits it like here. Okay. Where it just slides down the side. This is one of my first major bitches.
I thought it deflected.
He does, like when you watch the slow-mo, he doesn't get on. It's like on the side and it like rides down it. It is a shitty hit, and this is one of my bitches. One of my big bitches. Okay. Well, first thing I want to say, watching these guys stab armor with these swords is very painful to watch. These probably should not be swords stabbing into armor with.
Probably.
You could see that in the bending of it. So when Brian swings on the helmet, he absolutely misses the top of the head. The other one got the top of the head. I'm not arguing that the steel helmet is better than a brass helmet. There's no argument to that. But the show takes whatever action the experts do and act like every swing that warrior is doing is that exact swing. That is the only swing that they do.
Also, you forgot to mention Hannibal's gonna be moving.
Yeah, he's gonna be moving. He's not
gonna be standing still.
Now, whenever you're talking about head injuries like that with a helmet on your head, you're not talking about like a sword at that point. It's blunt force trauma.
Yeah,
and that falcata absolutely has enough weight to cause enough PSI damage. If you were to hit on top of the helmet to cause, it would be over that 80 PSI threshold.
Okay.
And that's what they base the entire edge off of, is Brian missing the top of the helmet.
What I want to know is, against the steel armor, would the falcata get more kills than the American Mafia baseball bat?
Maybe. But the entire edge of this is based off of Brian's inability to hit the top of the helmet on one shot, and they're like, that's it, that's the whole... I mean, I'm not arguing that Cengiz's stuff is probably way better, but you could easily still cause that blunt force
but the
trauma
BS
to the
is
head.
the BS.
Yeah.
I'm imagining a bunch of mafia led by Al Capone riding elephants with the baseball bats into war. Let's get 'em, boys!
Hey, you came to the wrong tribe.
Death to Rome.
Hey, Caesar.
I wrote
Caesar, where's the gabagoo?
I wrote good test, shady result.
They're like. So, Tony, I think this is Caesar's palace. I've never watched The Sopranos.
There's a funny line in The Sopranos where they're obviously Italian mafia, in case you haven't seen it, and they're extorting this hotel chain that's run by a Jewish family, and they compare it to like because they're all idiots, talk about like the Romans crucifying Jesus, and at one point someone was like, "What have happened to the Romans?" And Tony goes, "You're looking at them." It's an American mob boss living in New Jersey. Like, yeah, I'm like Julius Caesar, kind of. I mean, you think about it.
If you ate too much pizza.
If you think about it, I'm kind of like Julius Caesar. Okay, so they give the edge to the Lamellar armor. It holds up better. It's steel replaced bronze. So
I do have something to say about, they talk about the bone setting. I researched that because I thought that was interesting.
Whatever notes you got, go for it.
Dorian has a little bit about, because I think they talk about like how a certain blow would
I know what you're talking
break
about.
a bone or something, and then Dorian was like, "That's totally fine," because they had dedicated bone setters.
Yeah,
it's not just like, oh, this is the bone setting unit. Like, bone setting is a huge part of Mongolian medicine, Mongolian culture.
Interesting.
So I just copy paste this from traditionalbodywork.com, because I thought they put it pretty simply. They said, bone setting is part of Mongolian traditional medicine and is done by so-called brachyshus, that is, by highly specialist traditional bone setters. Mongolian bone setting is famous for its ability to treat illness related to bone fractures, joint dislocations, and soft tissue damage. Traditionally, the treatment consists of 6 parts: renovation, fixing, massage, herbal baths, care, and recovery. And apparently when they would push the bone back into place, they would somehow do this without any pain to the person. So,
Are they doing that on the battlefield? Massage and herbal baths in the middle of the fight?
I might.
Tony's like, "Get the bone setters up here."
Hey, yeah. After sitting in a chair for my desk job all the time, I might need to visit a bone setter for my freaking back. You know what I'm saying, boys? All right, moving on. Anybody got any other notes about the edge going to Lamellar armor? Everybody cool?
I agree with it, but I don't like the reason why.
Shady result.
Shady result.
All right, well, we take a break from weapons and move into battlefield tactics, which they coin as Max Chalk Talk. I don't know if you guys saw that.
Yeah, the first.
It popped up for like, it was the same as when Jeff's fabrication lab popped up. It's Max Chalk Talk.
That's part of why we have our like math movie corner.
Yeah.
You have to make your own, even if it's like like halfway through the season, we come up with our own names.
So for Hannibal's battlefield tactics, they do the Battle of Cannae and Hannibal's double envelopment. So basically what the show presents is Hannibal presented a weak center to the Romans, causing them to charge in. Then he slowly retreats until the Romans get surrounded on their flanks, at which point he can kind of close in on them and they're all surrounded and they just get slaughtered. So Lucas, can you tell us about the Battle of Cannae and this tactic?
Sure, yeah. It was fought August 2nd, 216 BC, regarded as one of the greatest tactical feats in military history, and is Rome's worst defeat of all time. Hannibal had about 50,000 men to the Roman army of 86,400 men, and the Romans were currently coming off 2 losses, 2 L's, at Tribia and Tremene, and they decided to engage Hannibal and kind of push on him. So the Romans massed their heavy infantry in a much deeper formation than usual, while Hannibal employed the double envelopment tactic. So instead of having a real widespread army, Rome kind of condensed them and then made them longer into like a big arrow type thing. So the Romans pushed forward, and Hannibal moved his men to form walls around the outside, and with his final move, his men and cavalry locked up the back, and the Romans were completely trapped, and even with the greater numbers, were slaughtered. The loss of life on the Roman side is considered the single most lethal day in fighting history. Only about 15,000 Romans, mostly those in camps surrounding the engagement, who did not actually join the battle, escaped death, and the news of the feat reached Rome, and the city went into a panic. And this is crazy. The Roman response to this, they buried 4 people alive as a sacrifice to their gods and raised 2 new legions.
Wow. Yeah, they got their ass kicked so
We
hard.
got our ass kicked, bury 4 people alive to appease our gods.
Catch that third L and you're like, dude, we might lose. We better like step up.
After you cover Genghis Khan, I have a pretty massive grievance on this one too. I'm getting in my bitching mode now.
Guys will of course get a chance with the edges. I just want to mention, fun fact, this double envelopment tactic inspired a similar tactic on the very popular Game of Thrones episode Battle of the Bastards, where the Bolton forces end up surrounding Jon Snow and the wildlings.
I almost mentioned that.
There's that iconic shot, that aerial drone shot where Jon Snow's like coming up. Sorry if you haven't watched the show. Get on it. He's coming up through the center of the guys, and the Boltons got their shields and they're closing in, and that was
that good gif.
Yeah,
of Jon Snow with the sword.
They were inspired. That was inspired by this battle. So, moving on to Chenghis's battlefield tactics, we get the battle at River Kalka in 1223 AD. Basically, the show says the Mongols ride in with the horse archers, they pepper the enemy and retreat. And over 9 days, the Rus and Kipchak forces are pursuing these Mongol cavalry because there's far fewer of them. So they feel like if we can just get our holds on the little bastards, we can kill them, right? So they follow them for 9 days and eventually fall into a Mongol trap where they're surrounded and peppered with arrows. So, Craig and Brendan, this is our third faint retreat in a row for ancient warriors. We got Napoleon's bait and bash, William the Conqueror's faint retreat, and now Genghis's, and every single time the faint retreat gets the fucking edge. So I guess simple, but it works. What do you guys think? Can you tell us a little bit about the Battle at River Kalka?
I just honestly, I couldn't find too much that was unique or exciting, but it was basically just a feigned retreat. I couldn't really see a super exciting storyline like I did with Billy. I just noted that it's also a mission in Age of Empires 4, as we covered, which, if you're at all interested, that's such a cool, it's almost the Deadliest Warrior spiritual successor, how they have it set up. So if you have a decent PC, it's a pretty cool game. I haven't played it, but Brendan...
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So yeah, I didn't see too much interesting, just it was basically feigned retreat.
Yeah, from my knowledge, the Rus had always been sort of skirmishing with the Mongols, and Genghis, who actually wasn't present at this battle, he sent his two best generals, I think, I don't know how to pronounce it, it is Jebe, Jeba, but I've heard it pronounced like
it's
Jiva,
Jeb exclamation point,
Jedediah,
and Subutai.
I was gonna say Jeb exclamation point, Jeb.
And they sent a large force to deal with these, and the Rus allied themselves with another Turkic tribe, or sort of Turco-Mongol tribe, the Cuman Kipchaks, who were rivals with the Mongols, that things weren't going too well, but they made this alliance to try and finally deal with this force that was coming towards them, and they got a bit too overzealous. They really wanted to have a finally get rid of this and stop this advance and these skirmishes, but they were harried for quite a way and then destroyed.
No one stopped to think do you think they're leading us into a trap?
It's actually pretty interesting. I've read that the Mongols, they would camp during these nights, because they said that this went on for 9 days. They would camp very close to the enemy in case there was any night attacks, and they would sometimes go out and do raids and whatnot, and it was very difficult for anybody to disengage. So the only choice that they really had was
they left them with was to keep pursuing.
They couldn't go back because there's this huge force and there's probably more people coming. So you're just going to put yourself into a worse and worse situation. So you just need to try and get this over with.
Yeah, they were following the Mongols, and then they realized, and Admiral Akbar was like, "It's a feigned retreat."
They tried to run away in their sleep and come back when they were sleeping, but it didn't work.
So the edge goes to Genghis Khan. Matt gives the edge to Genghis in battlefield tactics. And the stats come out to Hannibal gets a 76 versus Genghis's 89, which I found pretty staggering. Hannibal has a reputation as a brilliant tactician. Even the examples given, I'm not saying Genghis wasn't a great military leader, because he obviously conquered a lot of stuff, but Hannibal seemed like a little more impressive just in the specific examples. But that's my subjective opinion.
I think there's like more impressive stuff against his campaign against the Jin dynasty of northern China. I just forgot to write that down, and I am not going to try and pronounce any of these Chinese place names, because that would not go well. I was already pushing my limit trying to pronounce those Mongol titles and names.
Lucas, I can see the steam coming out of your ears.
Let me off the leash.
What are your thoughts here?
Let me off the leash.
Yeah. Go, boy, go.
They give this one to Genghis Khan when Hannibal literally had one of the greatest strategic moves of all time in all military history. Because Genghis Khan could tire people out over 9 days, and Max says, it's mental warfare. You tire them out over 9 days and you defeat them mentally and then physically. On the other side, Hannibal completed a mass slaughter and battle in one swift movement using superior strategy and doesn't get the edge. Instead of dragging this out to 9 days, he does one superior move and ends it in one battle. How does a feigned retreat get an edge over a superior battle tactic to literally the biggest loss of one of the greatest empires of all time?
Cope.
Why break someone's spirit for 9 days when you could just kill them and be done with it and move on to your next battle? I don't like this one.
Okay.
The result is the same.
It is, but what if something happens in that 9 days? Something shift in the battle. You could have that battle over with, and you can move on.
It'll just go on longer.
We don't need to drag it out. You can win the battle. You don't win the battle that you don't finish on time. When you can fucking finish it that day.
I'm gonna guess we're split on the edges. The comment I will give, I'm certainly not expert enough to determine who's more of a genius in these battles. From my layman's perspective, it seems like the Battle of Cannae is like a little more legendary of a feat than the River Kalka battle. But what did stand out to me was statting it Hannibal's 76 to Genghis's 89.
One of the great military strategists.
Wow. Yeah, that should have been like a 1 point difference.
Yeah, I was
using a fantastic military strategy to end a battle where you were vastly outnumbered against one of the strongest armies, and you get a 76? Did you say it was?
Yeah,
you get a 76. You get a C.
You got a C. Yeah, he's barely passing the class.
That's like A. Like to A+ material.
Yeah, I feel like he should definitely. However, we've talked about X factors. However, the frick they're scoring this stuff, I feel like Hannibal should at least be within a few points of Genghis Khan. I said Genghis Khan. I did
Let's just say a different name every time you reference him.
That's the challenge of this episode. Say it different every time.
Genghis. So, like I said, it's been Genghis Khan for me forever, and now I'm like trying to do it right for the episode.
Mangus.
Yeah.
Listen,
I should have just abandoned that at the beginning.
Let me put it this way: the Super Mario speed run, the guy who finished it in like 3 hours. That's the guy you care about. The guy who's been playing the game for 9 days and he's like, I'm almost done. It's not a speed run.
Can't argue with that.
It's a 1-to-1 comparison. I love how fired up you are, Lucas.
I got more.
Let's keep it going.
That is actually not the worst comparison we're going to encounter tonight, as we'll get to the aftermath.
So, back to weapons. They do their last set of weapons. We have the Jita Lance, which comes in at a length of 12 feet, weight of 4.5 pounds, and an 8-inch steel blade with a wood shaft. That always gets me. Versus Hannibal's Soliferum, which is a length of 5 feet, weight of 7 pounds. So shorter, but heavier because it's a throwing object. Iron shaft, iron tip. So... yeah, right. Shorter, but
depends on how you use it.
Both of these weapons are tested from horseback against a static target. Both kill, and I especially like the funny sound effects they played when the lance goes in and then it's taken out. It's like a foam dummy.
Nice. Yes. Nice.
Nicely done. Okay, this is why I love these penetrating injuries, because it's all about the location of placement. Watch you guys. Thank you.
And there's no microphone there, but they insert like chink, shink. Like even when Dorian like pulls it out of the target, it goes like shink.
It goes,
So, the lance penetrates the enemy target. However, because of the shot placement is on the right side, this is a Deadliest Warrior sin, my friends. If you ever get a chance to be an expert on the reboot show, which we'll be in charge of, so you won't have to worry, but if someone else gets the gig, you know, they're going to give it to the fucking Try Guys or something, you know, and they'll be like, who would win if a samurai fought a ninja?
watch me hit the gritty.
Yeah. Whoa. We had to cut one of our guys out for the rest of the season.
He won't be back.
Anyways, it is a sin. Anytime someone hits here, any episode of Deadliest Warrior, we've never called it out before, but anytime you get hit here, Dorian loves it. Dorian loves to jump on and be like, well, that's actually not a kill right away. You got to hit here. You got to hit in the left side of the body where the heart is, where all those good arteries are. If you get hit here, guys, you're fine. You can take a 12 gauge slug to your right.
Because they make incisions right here.
Yeah, you can take a 12 gauge slug to that right nipple. You'll be walking away. So,
Dude, I told you, Dorian is on something this episode. You might go, Lucas, are you only team Hannibal? No, I'm team Genghis here. They're literally, he buries that lance 9 inches into a dummy, and it's not a kill shot because that's where chest tubes go. I worked in a hospital. That's where chest tubes go. It's not a 9-inch fucking blade going into your chest.
So, to your point, they show one shot from behind the mannequin, and you can see there is an exit wound. The lance went entirely through the dummy, which I know is not like perfectly, you know, human viscosity or whatever.
Tube in? That's what.
Right. Yeah. He is on one, and then it's not like the soliferum hits a guy dead between the eyes or something. Brian rides up, throws the soliferum, and it hits like under the rib cage, and Dorian's like, well, this would hit the spleen, which would cause a lot of bleeding. And I would just like to note that neither of these weapons are tested against armor. And I think the reason for that is my prediction would be that the steel lance would probably go right through that bronze chest armor, especially coming on the back of the horse, or at least it would do a little more damage. That soliferum would probably bounce right off of that lamellar.
It's a garbage play shot objectively from my team, and they're like, this is a better shot.
Right, yeah, because I was picturing it with the shot Brian delivered. It's the same exact place he put the falcata, which Jeff specifically says is doubled up. Now, you know, the soliferum might be designed to like go through armor, but keep in mind this is a different time period. It's not built to go through the steel lamellar that's 1400 years after the soliferum is, you know, around. So I thought this whole thing, this one even more so than the elephant test, because I at least understood what was going on there. Like, this is a bizarre comparison, but it's because they want to get an elephant on here, right? Yeah. Like, we want to see an elephant because it is cool, and it turned out to be the most memorable thing about the episode. This test has the most, I'm just going to say it, chump fuckery going on. I've been trying to insert a chump fuckery into every episode. So, what do you guys think? I want to hear your thoughts on this test. They give the edge to the soliferum because it's like he has multiple shots. He gets at least 3.
Yeah, like they carry 3.
He gets at least 3 of them, as if you can't hit a target with a lance and pull it out. Like, what do you guys think about it?
Let me tell you a little bit about the soliferum too, while I'm still looking at it. So that was actually the Roman name given to the ancient Iberian pole weapon made entirely of iron. It was designed, I looked it up, so it was designed to be thrown. It was very similar to javelin, up to about 30 meters. It very commonly had a barbed tip and was known to pierce shields and armor of the time.
Yeah.
In the Iberian language, it was known as the Siunion, so that probably would have been a more fitting name for it. They were commonly used, what its actual use for was in volleys. Whenever everyone's rushing in, you know, all 1,000 of your guys throw these things ahead before you engage in just more traditional, like, sword combat. The Iberian warmer was typically buried with their soliferum as well, and was believed to have its origins with the migrating Celts who brought it to Iberia, where it gained its notoriety. So
cool. I feel like, you know, the soliferum, when I first watched the episode, like, intuitively this should have gone up against the Mongol bow. I felt like.
Yeah.
It's like the range.
I mean, it's more of a javelin. It's a ranged weapon. Yeah.
that they're
And
using.
probably do more damage.
Yeah, in mass. Now, is there anything you guys want to add about the Mongol Jita lance? It's pretty self-explanatory.
Yes, actually, for the longest reason, for the longest time, I didn't know why they put like the hair around the blade. It's actually to stop blood from dripping down the shaft.
Oh, that would make it slippery, right?
Yeah, and you lose control of it. So, and those were usually made of horsehair, but more commonly, Mongol Jita lances would have these little hooks at the end, so you could also hook somebody off. Of
Oh,
your-
yeah.
off of their
My
horse.
shaft gets slippery.
He starts to lose grip. Continue, sorry.
I can't remember. What
Anyways, Brendan was pointing out that the horsehair keeping the blood off the shaft.
Oh, yes.
And the hook being on the end of some of their weapons so they could get a guy off horseback, right?
And horsehair was pretty important, and
Listen, I always
horses were very revered, so things that had horsehair, like their spirit banners, were held with high regard.
Okay.
Dude, this is where they give Hannibal his fucking advantage on this test, not his superior battle strategy.
So the edge goes to the Soliferum. I don't know. What do you guys think?
They also
about
call
the
the
edge?
Soliferum the shot into the spleen. They also call that, or Dr. Dorian calls that not a kill shot. Dude, this is 200 BC. Okay,
Right.
like this is the age where people burned each other alive to sacrifice to gods and stuff. What are you gonna crawl? Where's this trauma center of 200 BC that these people are alive?
Imagine yanking that Soliferum out of your stomach and being like, "I'll be all good." That spleen, cut that up.
Dude, back in those times, they burned you at the stake for like sneezing. They're like, he's possessed.
So, what do you guys think about the edge? Like, agreed? Craig,
I just don't care.
No,
I think I'm gonna go against my own team here, and I don't know. The lance would probably be more practical.
It seems like
Wasn't that their like main weapon that they used?
It was main for the cavalry,
Yeah.
but just everybody else, like everybody had a bow and would use it at least to some degree.
I'll say this. I'm not just trying to be negative or dismissive. I think we noticed on the show that they definitely have top billing for weapons and matchups. They save the sexy ones for the beginning. The one right before the sim is definitely the stinker, where it's like,
even now, especially with season 3, because they design it in a way that, like, I remember in season 2 they would always test one weapon before the first commercial break, and that weapon was always supposed to be the real, like, the grabber, like the McQueedle would get before the commercial break, because that would get you in.
You got to get the hook in first.
Yes.
yeah. And that could be why there's elephant versus the bow.
Oh, for sure, I think. And with this, to your point, Craig, now they have a battlefield tactics, and they put it right in the middle of the weapons. And I don't think it's a coincidence that that last weapon on this episode, and maybe it's not always the case, but they did like the cavalry saber versus the Koli Shmard. Before that, Joan and Will, the swords and armors are at the end, I think, and that's like the coolest. That's like the best part of the show. So it's not maybe all the way through, but on this episode, it's definitely like they were like, let's just bury the lance and the Soliferum at the back here.
This one just comes down to how slippery your shaft is, I think.
Yep. Can you get a grip on it? It's really what it's about.
I think we all need to get a grip at this. Let's continue the episode.
Let's take our shafts and slip into the X factors.
Yikes.
So we have we have the X factor of battlefield strategy, which I got really confused. Okay, because normally it's called. Am I wrong here that it's called battlefield tactics usually? And
That's different.
That is but here's the thing. That's usually the X factor that is based on the Max Chalk Talk or whatever. That's usually the X factor you get from that, and it's listed there, and it's not listed in the X factor conversation. This time around, it's battlefield strategy. Okay, and let me finish because I have something to say before we get into it. I was wondering, because I'm like, is Battlefield Strategy and Battlefield Tactics like both X factors in this matchup? Because what is the difference? So I went onto Wikipedia, okay, the Deadliest Warrior Wikipedia, which is super accurate and has a ton of trivia. This is not the Deadliest Wiki. This is Deadliest. This is Wikipedia.com, Deadliest Warrior, all the episodes. On there, they list 4 X factors, and they are Battlefield Strategy, Physicality, Metallurgy, which are all the ones we see, and the 4th one is Intimidation. They list Intimidation on there, and we don't see that in the episode. In Intimidation, Genghis gets the advantage at 89 to 86. I don't know if that's a typo. I don't know if Deadliest Warrior just repeated the Battlefield Strategy thing twice. I'm not entirely sure. It's a little bit of a goof. Because either that's a typo and they did tactics and strategy,
But that wouldn't. Well, what's the point?
it wouldn't make any sense, or they did Intimidation but they just cut it because maybe the segment wasn't that cool. I don't know, because I know that Intimidation is a factor in the episode before this, Rangers North Koreans, so I don't know if they just didn't want to double up on it.
Can I just say my other bitch now too? Because I'm gonna
Go ahead.
I'm gonna go on it.
You
The
said that
second,
every single.
I know. The second fucking category we get, the same thing happens. Armor, metallurgy.
Yeah.
We had an entire section testing the armor.
The fact that armor is an X factor is
Twice.
stupid.
They count it twice.
It's
It's
like
2 losses from a boy. We had a literal test. How do you do another X factor of armor? It's the same thing.
So let's run through these, guys. We got Battlefield Strategy. Genghis Khan gets 89 to Hannibal's 76, which we already talked about. Now, the justification given in this segment is that Hannibal does not stop Rome, while Genghis is never defeated. And they treat that like it's the ultimate, like, ace card. Like, yeah, but Genghis Khan, they don't stop him till he just dies. And I'm like, how... like, is that really Hannibal's fault that he loses the war? Because I'm pretty sure we didn't go into it, but I think like Carthage wouldn't send reinforcements, and then Rome started attacking Carthage,
he just
so
kinda
Hannibal
backed
had to
off
go home.
and then gave up.
Yeah.
As in all
just kinda
things,
went
like,
back to home.
Context is so important. You know, debatably, the Vietnamese defeated the United States in the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
Is the Viet Cong stronger than the U.S. Army, U.S. military?
Right.
Context matters.
I think what you're touching on, Craig, is there's a difference between like battle tactics, which is what we're talking about here, and overall like warfare strategy. Because like I would say the Vietnamese had the superior strategy for the war. So the United States kind of went in there and it was like, what are we going to do?
There was a lot of incompetent leadership in there too.
Battle to battle, the United States is winning most of these battles because they got tech superiority, but the overall war strategy is like unwinnable, kind of.
Yeah.
So I think it's completely unfair. I'm not saying it's unfair to give Genghis the edge here, even as a superior strategist, because he did conquer world. He was a great, like, just a great military leader, basically. Very smart. But it's so one-sided, and the only justification I seem to get for it being 89 to 76 is that Hannibal lost the war, which is kind of like, I feel like,
technically
not
the war
cool.
more ended than like real losers from it.
Right. He's one general.
I mean, he did lose the Battle of Zama, and that was kind of like the...
Yeah, that was like where he lost the respect, and they kind of sent him back home.
I mean, they couldn't really... I don't think they could have recovered from that.
Yeah.
I don't know, just...
Lucas is like, I didn't read about that. So.
I had something about it earlier, but I'm already on to bigger and better things.
Sure.
Something else to bitch about.
So I'm thinking on
So,
next bitching point.
We've got the secret 4th X Factor of Intimidation, where Genghis gets 89, Hannibal gets 86. No comments. We're going to skip it.
Genghis, I mean, listen, he's one of the most powerful warlords, and he's got this giant army that large contiguous empire. high B intimidation.
Yeah, high B. Yeah, it is curious how they.
Hey,
train
Genghis,
stuff.
rock, paper, scissors. Oh, you lost. I never lose. Kill this man.
Intimidating presence on Fallout.
If he slaps my girl's ass, I'm not going to totally cower, but I'm going to say, hey, watch it. That's the intimidation level he's at. He's not quite at A territory.
He's just a B.
Yeah.
Physicality, which we again already covered earlier in the episode. It is interesting. I didn't notice that at first, but you guys pointed that out. Like all of these we've already covered.
Yeah,
we did
just
Max Talk
reiterating.
Talk. We did the veggies versus meat at the beginning of the episode, and we did
Veggie talk.
the whole
Artorian's veggie talk.
Artorian's veggie talk.
Hannibal's veggie tail.
Hannibal, notorious vegetarian.
So physicality.
The notorious vegetarian of Carthage.
The Romans are gathered in the Senate and they're like, you don't understand. This man only eats vegetables. He's a monster. So Genghis Khan gets a 76 in physicality. I don't even know what's going on anymore. Like,
Fuck you, Robert Daly. That's what's going on.
A 76, like, Genghis Khan is probably lean, athletic, at least for a good portion of his life until he gets super rich, maybe. He's a C. He gets a C. I don't know. Hannibal gets an 81. The reason is based on diet. I guess we already touched on that.
Because this is a UFC fight, and they're going into, the 5th championship. They're going to the championship rounds
Dorian
now.
does say if this goes, he specifically says that this goes into the 10th round. And it's like, again, how long does a sim last? Like, because
It's because
9 days.
2,500th round.
I think for a simulation like that, you're not playing an RTS game, even if that's what the sim is. You're hitting enter and getting the result immediately. Like, is it factoring in that some fights went on for... We don't know.
I think
I'm asking this rhetorically.
The new and improved sim is out in the season where it's all new scientific and everything, but that curtain's starting to fall a little bit. You're starting to get a little peek behind about how bullshit it is.
The man behind the curtain is Robert Daly. His illusion is that he has a green beret, but when you look behind the curtain, he's like, all right, so I wore one time.
That's why he's in the Emerald City. 'Cause it's Green Beret.
So
Pay no attention to my Green Beret status on my application.
the third X factor we see is metallurgy, which again we already covered with armor. Genghis Khan gets 85 to Hannibal's 74. Again, what's a 0? Do you guys think? Just naked?
Yeah, I guess.
So I guess putting on.
Having a skin condition where your skin like melts and contact.
I was paper skin.
I was born with glass bones and paper skin.
Every day I break my leg.
Like
Every day I
at
break-
this point, you may as well have the X factors be like lancage,
Yeah. So
elephantage.
the reason is steel versus bronze, because the 1,400-year difference. You can tell I was getting fed up at this point in my notes. Now, here's what I loved. Right before the reenactment, Jeff comments that the X factors and the test results are pretty even, and I would heavily disagree. What? I think the writing is completely on the wall at this point. Like, Hannibal's only edges that he's gotten this is why I was even more shocked that they didn't give him the tactics, because they usually give that to the loser, the guy that's gonna lose, because it's like a consolation gift. Like, well, you're gonna lose because of the weapons, but like we'll give you strategy. Genghis wins armor, mid-range, so 1 out of the 3 weapon categories. He wins battlefield tactics. He has the most X factors.
Armor again.
He has more X factors, and where he has an advantage is much more staggering. Physicality, there's only a difference of 5 between them. So, like, he has every advantage except for Soliferum versus Lance, which I think is an extremely questionable edge, and Elephant versus Bow, which I also think is an extremely questionable edge. So I think the writing's on the wall at this point, and Jeff is full of shit. Jeff, I know the producer told you to say it. Come on.
I wish he was honest, just like, okay, well, looks like Genghis is gonna win, but
Well,
Yikes.
it's scripted because you figure they would say that at some. If it was like actual guys doing research, you would get to a point where you're like after that armor, after the armor test, I would be like, I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I don't see how Hannibal like overcomes the armor thing. Like I don't know. So, without further ado, Lucas, can you take us into this reenactment where almost no one is on horseback and the Mongols don't use their bows at all?
Welcome to the damn sim, where I'm your grand sim master, Lucas, to lead you through this shit show of the most inaccurate bullshit you've ever seen.
Yeah.
All right.
Ready to hit your inner key.
Wait, let me find my inner piece first.
I hope we don't hit the stop record button.
It's in Fates.
Whenever everyone's ready, I found my inner piece, and go ahead and hit those inner keys. Today we are joined by Genghis Khan and 4 Mongolian soldiers, previously the Deadliest Warrior Season 2 champs. So we have 4 Season 2 champs on his team. Versus Hannibal and 4 of his dudes. We open up, Genghis on horseback, patrolling with his men.
Forgot about that WWE sim. You're right. The Mongol got it.
Yeah, he was he won the Royal Rumble. You hear a subtle roar of an elephant in the distance. Oh shit, it's Hannibal literally riding on the back of the war elephant with his 4 other guys, one of them mounted on horseback. Both armies spot each other. Sorry, both groups of a couple guys spot each other, not armies. And it's on. Genghis and his team open up with a volley of fire from their bows, and one of Hannibal guys takes an arrow straight to the knee, straight to the throat. I'm done with those now. Hannibal then gives his order for his man on horseback to charge in, solely Ferrum in hand. But Genghis ain't leading no bitches, and one of them rushes in, but he gets the javelin straight through the chest. No chest armor. Genghis himself then picks his lance up, charges in, being the fearless, terrible warlord he is. He stabs Hannibal's man on horseback, and even though he got 9 inches of blade into him, he doesn't die immediately, but dies slowly.
Yeah.
We get a good shot of old Susie the elephant letting Hannibal down off her back. And you know Susie has to get some action in this fight. Just off screen, Hannibal presumably is having her chug a gallon of Jack Daniels while he pokes her in the ankle. The enraged Susie starts absolutely rampaging towards the Mongols like... They fire off some arrows into her. Chalk up animal cruelty under Genghis Khan's X Factor. Never mind the fact that Hannibal got his elephants drunk and poked them. Just like my girl. The madness of seeing an elephant charging in is too much for the Mongols, and they retreat. Not before one of them trips up and we get the 6 CGI shot of Susie stepping on him. Probably one of the greatest shots of the episode.
It is funny because the guy does the fake trip thing where he's like, whoa, whoa, and then the elephant just steps on his head.
We get the
the cartoon
extremely...
noise like,
His head just pops like a fucking cherry.
In case you didn't see it,
like a
we get a
grape.
grotesque still shot of like the guy's body laying there
In
exploding.
case you were wondering, did he make it?
Spike TV, baby. The Mongols then engage again and start shooting the elephant with arrows. This is too much for the elephant. And by I mean the rental from the local zoo was probably up, so Susie gallops off in the distance.
I love that scene because like the noises are just so contrasting to the action.
The elephant just grabs
Just like walks away, and the noise is like, woo, 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 and the elephant's just like,
oh my god!
As the CG arrows are like sticking into it.
yeah.
Meanwhile, Genghis Khan rides in and slices another Hannibal's men with his saber. Hannibal's last guy chases down the Mongols, who fired at the elephant and engages with them after missing his javelin throw. We get a sweet stab through the chest of one of the Mongols with a sword that's not meant for stabbing through the armor that couldn't be pierced earlier. The dude is like an action hero representing Hannibal, except he got cut down by the other Mongol. But Hannibal's there and does the brutal stab through the back as he whispers him good night. That means we're down to our 2 generals here, our 2 warmongers, our 2 leaders. It's the main show. Buckle up, because here we go. Genghis, the known gentleman, dismounts his horse so they can meet in equal combat.
No gentleman. Napoleon does the same shit in that Washington.
It's just for the reenactment, but it's so dumb.
You're on horseback. Why would you ever?
You have a 12-foot lance, but
the known gentleman. Yeah.
So we get some sword fighting with back-to-back hits and a couple helmet bonks. Then Genghis gets a swing in that cuts Hannibal's leg. Then he smacks the shield out of Hannibal's hand. It ain't looking so good for my boy. Except Hannibal gets a death blow straight into Cengiz's stomach, but it doesn't pierce the armor. Damn. Genghis then retreats for 9 days, leading Hannibal to follow after him, mentally wearing him out. Just kidding. He hits him over the head of the helmet a couple more times and slices open his neck. Winner, Genghis Khan.
Nice. Straight up. So we got the results here. Total battles won. Genghis won 2,739, which was 55%, to Hannibal's 2,261, which was 45%.
It's close.
I will say Robert Daly claims that the battle was really close. However, by season 3 standards, this is not a close matchup, actually. It's actually basically tied for the second most one-sided matchup of season 3. This is another indication that season 3 is completely rigged. So the most one-sided one is Saddam versus Pol Pot, which I think is roughly like 60-40. I could pull it up, but
we'll be there soon.
This one and another future episode hit about 55-45%, and so it's by season 3 standards not a close matchup at all. So weapon effectiveness: Turco-Mongol saber versus Falcata was 57% for the saber to 43% for the Falcata. The recurve bow got 62% versus the war elephant's 38%.
Dude, I thought I was done being pissed off at this point.
I have no
The war element gets the fucking edge at 38%.
So I don't understand. Did they have like 5 people out there with bows and then 1 elephant running around during those sections? Because they're like, for sword versus sword, right? We're not doing total kills anymore. We're doing this versus this at a particular range. That makes sense if you have long, medium, and short range. It does not make sense when you have a bow versus an elephant. Like, is there a stage where none of the Carthaginians are fighting and they just let the elephant go? Like,
if there's 5 bows, shouldn't there be 5 elephants also? If
right.
Or there should be 1 bow versus 1 elephant. Doesn't make sense. How does it get 38% when it literally gets the edge? The seams and the crack
if
of
the guy
curtain
gets off the elephant, does the elephant count as a kill?
Right. This is interesting. So
is the elephant one of the warriors? Like,
should that not have been one of his warriors?
It doesn't make any fucking sense. And I don't see Genghis Khan's horse listed on here. How many kills did that get?
Don't worry.
Did that trample over anybody?
The bow versus the elephant is the single worst result we get from this.
So, Gita Lance versus Soliferum. I actually looked this up. It is the most one-sided.
I didn't even pay attention to
the
that.
Most
why?
The most dominant weapon of all season 3. So 86% to 14%. Soliferum beat out the Gita Lance. That is
Robert
wild.
Daly inputting into this this thing.
The Soliferum has like the same stats as like a fucking hand grenade or something. Like,
it's literally the M16 of the ancient world.
Insane. Just based on what we saw, like the test.
Is it more dominant than the twin hooks?
So I did not do the math for comparing it to the previous seasons. I just know for season 3, it was the most one-sided of all the weapons. So very interesting. Armor failure rate. This is probably the most important stat on here. So another thing that doesn't make any sense.
What does it mean?
I don't know if you guys noticed it. So let's get into it. So the lamellar fails 1.32% of the time. apparently all 1.32% was against the soliferum. Fails 1.32% of the time versus the musculata failing 4.22% of the time. You would think these failure rates would be way higher.
70%.
Yeah.
Well, aren't they the same as? I guess they don't have to be, but I would think it'd be the same as kills. Yeah.
I guess unless you're hitting the head, the face. And I also asked the question in my notes, does it count as an armor failure if you get stepped on by an elephant?
Yes, because it compresses.
Yeah, does the armor fail? Chenghis's helmet failed 0.78% versus him. Sorry. I almost called him Damar Hamlin. Versus Hannibal's helmet at 7.48%. So like 7 times more.
Yo, me after getting stepped on by an elephant. Did we win?
That's not even the funny part. The funny part is this. So for some reason, so up to this point, like the bronze is failing more than the steel, which makes sense based on what we saw. But then for some reason, Chenghis's shield fails 7.48% to Hannibal's shield at 2.8. So I can't help but think that some intern mixed up the graphic there.
Yeah.
Like, why is his bronze and wooden shield failing exponentially less than the steel shield?
I'm missing the old
idea.
sim at this point. I'm starting to feel that I'm missing the old sim.
You're right.
Bring back Max.
Yeah, bring back Max.
Sim.
I miss the old sim so much because even though it made no sense at all, it made more sense than this somehow. Yeah. Some fucking how it made more sense than this. So some very interesting numbers here. The recurve bow gets more kills than the elephant despite not getting the edge, but I'm not that surprised personally. The soliferum blows the Jita lance out of the water for no reason at all. I can't fathom why it's that one-sided.
Makes sense to me.
Does getting crushed by a war elephant count as armor failure? Also, I think someone messed up the stat graphics since Hannibal's shield outperforms Chenghis's by a lot for no reason. And of course, Robert Daly remarking that it's close. It's not by season.
Dude, because he can hold a sword with one hand.
Yeah.
And the shield with the other.
Before we get to final thoughts, we're almost at the end of our epic quest here. Before we get our final thoughts, Craig, you want to walk us through the aftermath?
Get ready for Craig's Aftermath Dungeon. That's how I'm branding it.
I'm gonna start wearing a robe when I do the sim to be the sim grandmaster. Put on my robe.
Yeah, for all different segments, you get a doctor's robe, and then like Aftermath. I'm gonna get like a gimp mask, and I'm gonna be welcome to Craig's Aftermath Dungeon.
I want a graphic for my health corner where someone gets stabbed by a lance by 9 inches, and I go, he's going to be okay.
Right, yeah. Luckily, it's on the right side of the chest. There's nothing important there.
Just put a chest tube in.
Stick the tube in.
He got 8 inches of steel pierced from one side to the other, but he's fine. Right. He'll be good.
So the panel is Mac, Timothy May, and Brian Forrest. A viewer brings up the point that horses are more common in cavalry than elephants for a reason, and that because elephants are more unpredictable, which I think is a good point when we kind of touched on. Brian says it was a status symbol and disagrees and says that they were worth bringing along. And Timothy says horses don't like elephants because they think they, quote, smell funny.
This sounds like a schoolyard argument.
That's what the show is.
It was supposed to be camels, not elephants.
Talk to him. Talk to Timothy May. Think you know about Mongols and Timothy May? Fucking asshole. Okay. A little kid asks if Genghis and Hannibal, quote, trained for battle. And Timothy says it was a great question.
What? No.
I like that they took that kid's fucking...
He's like, oh yeah, they did train little Timmy. Mac talks about modern body armor in relation to Genghis's armor, and we get footage of random modern military, which I thought was interesting. Did you notice that?
Yes.
Is that from an episode?
It might be from like Rangers, North Koreans.
Yeah, we gotta check that because
I would need to rewatch the clip because honestly, I can't picture it right now.
it's like the one soldier with you see with like the M16 or whatever in like the beginning of the season 1.
Oh, interesting.
It's just like a squad of them. So I wonder if it's
That's
like
green,
lost.
That's like
footage.
Green Berets.
Yeah, we'll have to look. But I
I feel like if they're in the traditional camo, that's how the Rangers are dressed in that episode before this. So
yeah, that's the
you
most
can't
likely.
tell we're
explanation.
filming this before that episode.
Right.
No, it's
So we'll have to check on that. A viewer asked about the pronunciation of the word Genghis. Okay.
Right.
So which I think this is actually probably the most I've learned on an Aftermath segment. So this was a good question. Timothy says that the pronunciation is Changus, but as news of Changus's exploits spread, it reached the Arab world where there wasn't an equivalent ch sound and added the JG pronunciation. So this spread to a French historian who wrote a book about Genghis and wrote it with a soft G. And when this was translated to English, that's where the G sound came from, and then Americans just stuck with the hard G. So, and Timothy hates the word, he hates, quote, the G word, and says that John Wayne pronounced it as Genghis, and he died of cancer, so.
All right.
So.
good shot.
Carcinogen.
Yeah. Next, Matt compares low-tech warriors having a chance against more high-tech warriors to 9/11.
Yo, dude, I brought that up. I was like, Mac brings up
What a weird.
9/11 in the aftermath for some reason. He's like, and he specifically says, he's like, people get upset when I talk about this. And it's like, all right, let me stop you right there, Mac. He's like, the 9/11 hijackers, smart guys.
I mean, his point isn't totally ridiculous.
No,
His
it's
point is
not.
that, obviously America is so technologically advanced, but dudes with a bunch of box cutters fucked up the country that we're still feeling the effects to this day. Mm-hmm. So it's his point that in the right circumstances, tech doesn't matter and you can get the job done with whatever.
I know, but it has nothing to do with
It's weird to bring up
at all.
bronze armor versus a fucking steel armor.
It is like the farthest
Nothing.
contrast to this episode.
Yeah, I can imagine Kieran was like, how did we get here? Bringing up 9/11. And the aftermath ends with Kieran wincing at the cringe of having Saddam Hussein fight Pol Pot. Like, the trailer ends and Kieran's like...
Dude, they're all like breaking on set.
Yeah.
Mac's like, yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah, and Kieran asks Timothy who he thinks is going to win. And Timothy actually answers genuinely.
he's like, I think Pol Pot because he was more thorough.
Jeez. Just say neither and end the show.
Say the zombies.
Yeah.
The zombies.
Bring that back. So, yeah, that was Craig's Aftermath Dungeon. This was an interesting one.
I forgot about that. Johnny Lou brought up
The zombies or whatever.
the zombies versus the Jacks. And he's like, I'm picking the zombies or whatever. Wasn't even fucking listening.
Okay.
Oh my fucking god.
All right. Well, that's about it. I guess I'll save you the trouble with the final thoughts. I don't really have anything in particular. I agree with the outcome as the show presents it, and I guess just in general, the length of time is pretty significant and like the advancement of technology, so it's a little unfair to Hannibal. But also, I don't really know who Hannibal is, so I couldn't really give you an accurate estimation of who I think would win. So,
Well, now you know.
sorta. But yeah, that's my final thoughts.
This should have been like the most cut and dry. Like, it's kind of obvious who's going to win this fight from the beginning. So, and it should have just been presented like that. But they got there in the most annoying and infuriating way to me. Like, the results don't shock me, and I don't necessarily disagree with like any of the edges. But they managed to make it like infuriating the way they did it.
I think the weirdest thing is that we already had the Mongol, and now we have Genghis Khan too. And I know they switch it up a little bit, but it's the same warrior. Like,
I do want to say the Deadliest Warrior wiki team did revisit this. There is a 2.0 version of this matchup. I don't know if it was just one person. It seemed like one person wrote it.
Yeah, remember Al Alamein said like that's how it would be, is one person would write the whole thing and then everybody would vote and discuss.
I don't think anyone really voted too much on it, but if you Google this matchup, it comes up as revisited. But I don't really see many like comments under it.
Who won?
There's like 3 comments.
Do we know who won?
I'll let you know. I'll search through it here for a minute.
Okay.
Someone else can give a wrap up.
Brendan, what do you got? Final thoughts on this episode?
I think if they didn't use Attila the Hun, that probably would have been like the best matchup for Hannibal, because they'd both be like these huge enemies of Rome.
Yeah,
Like
that would be cool.
the scourge of Italy versus the scourge of God. That'd be pretty sick. But I mean, they already did that, so I really don't know what to say. I mean,
Did you enjoy the episode?
kinda.
No.
Like I don't really know.
Craig says it's A tier.
I mean, it has everything.
My friend's not allowed to have an
It
opinion.
has a lot of things that we would be bitching about. Like they added with the sword test in particular. But
To qualify my opinion, elephants are my favorite animal.
They are cool.
okay,
I mean, you can't argue with that.
We need
yeah, I
we need
can't.
the sequel to Watching Lions for 100 hours in Zootopia.
We have the sequel already. Watching Dinosaurs.
Watching Dinosaurs. Make sure you look up that video.
So whoever wrote this, whoever was part of the Deadliest Warrior wiki,
They might be watching.
yeah, the ending that they did, put it all together, and you have Genghis Khan, a better warrior than Hannibal was. Diet differences be damned.
I agree. I agree very heartily. I knew who Hannibal was before the episode. I don't know a ton. I didn't know a ton about him, but I knew who he was, and I guess right from the get-go, I was kind of like, man, this guy, like, you see that time gap, and I was just like, that is, I don't know how you overcome 1,400 years of difference.
They did him dirty with the strategy, though.
Yeah.
that I have to agree with that. Like, even though I was sort of in favor of
A C grade on that.
And you guys, Lucas, you asked, like, why is the Soliferum so one-sided? And I think when you look at the episode from the big picture, it becomes clear that, like, Hannibal's only advantages that they give him the whole episode are bow against the elephant, who the producers are planning on going back on,
Yeah.
I think it's just they give the elephant the edge to hype it up. Same reason they gave the ballista the edge, because it's cooler than the Scythian axe, even though a Scythian axe is a way more practical weapon for a 5-on-5 fight. Same thing. So they have to make this matchup close, they have to give the Soliferum like a ridiculous like amount of kills, because Hannibal's got those 2 edges, which are both questionable, one that gets overturned in the sim basically, and then he's got the diet, and that's it. And it's like, how much is that really affecting like this?
It's
Right.
something really interesting too is, what would like a rampaging elephant actually do, like in a test? But we're never.
They can't like test
Yeah,
it.
in like the past probably couple hundred years, it's been animal cruelty. They get an elephant drunk. So we haven't seen what a rampaging elephant could even really do. There's probably like no documented evidence of.
I kind of wish they hadn't brought a real elephant.
Yeah.
on. I wish they had.
I would rather have a computer CGI one
or
just going like bananas.
have Jeff build a little elephant foot, and then it comes down at the same amount of like weight as like what an elephant produces. Because I'm sure you can look that up. There's no way.
I'm sure.
It's the zombie bite. That's basically the same test.
Let me tell you, I bet you Jeff's machine didn't even work, and they just went stomping weight of an elephant on Google.
Yeah. So I don't disagree with the result. It feels very one-sided, and it has echoes to me of Vlad vs. Sun Tzu, except that Vlad is a much bigger meme. He's incredible. I don't mean to sound like meme. I'm just saying, like, Vlad is fun. He's funny. He's very interesting. And the way Genghis Khan is presented in this episode, Brendan reads this whole story where it's full of betrayal, and he doesn't know who his son's father is and all this stuff. And then Genghis Khan is kind of boring in this episode. I'm gonna be honest. Like, I wasn't impressed, and that to me It's not that this episode's particularly bad. It's just that like it's forgettable in my mind. Like I felt like I watched it the first time and it went right through me, and I was like, like my legume diet. So we've only watched the first 4 episodes so far, or at least I have, and this was my least favorite one so far. However, that being said, this is my final thoughts. Genghis Khan is definitely a contender for season 3 Back for Blood in the ancient category. I think he can go up, but we won't say who our season 2 winner is because that video is still being worked on. But I think he can definitely contend with some of the other guys from this season and, the winners from last season. And he is probably a contender in actual human history for the title of Deadliest Warrior. He's probably a serious contender for that title. I mean,
what if the season 2 winner, Mongol, ends up winning again? He gets our free ride into season 3, and then it's Genghis Khan versus Mongol.
Oh, you're talking about the Royal Rumble.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I'm talking about like the Back for
Did we put out the season 2?
Yeah.
The Royal Rumble?
Yeah.
I think we did, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that was where that Mongol won, wasn't it?
It was,
I think that's when we have like the shitty camera that I had.
Yeah, that's been up on the channel for a while.
Okay, cool.
All right. Well, cool, man. Anybody else got anything final to say? Anybody want to close us out? Lucas, why don't you close us out, man?
Man, I was livid watching this one.
Straight livid.
Allow me to just dust my hands of this one.
Give us your final bitch, but make it the sign off.
Fuck Robert Daly.
Yo, fuck Robert Daly.
I tell you what, more positive note, gentlemen, give a straight face. Whether it's the next one we record or not, it will be the next one that comes out after this. Are you guys looking forward to Saddam Hussein versus Pol Pot?
I have a very funny story relating to Pol Pot.
The first time that sentence has ever been said.
I promise it's worth it.
All right, guys. Well, stay tuned. Tune into the next episode to hear Craig's funny Pol Pot story.
Stay strapped in, stay tuned, and stay deadly.
Stay fucking deadly. Give it up, Lucas.